The day my great Aunt Lucille passed away, I inherited two things: her legacy and her lesson. She'd written it in her final note, tucked neatly inside a sealed envelope. People will show you who they really are the second they believe you're powerless. At the time, I didn't fully get it. I was 24, living in a tiny studio above a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, and pretending to make ends meet working part-time as a barista. But then came the real shock. Attached to that letter were legal documents confirming I was now sole heir to her entire estate, nearly $60 million in global investments, premium real estate across Europe and South America, and full ownership of Garnet Holdings, a quiet but monstrous conglomerate with its fingers in luxury hospitality, tech, and rare wine. Turns out my Aunt Lucille wasn't just the eccentric old woman who fed stray cats and always smelled like cinnamon. She was a corporate juggernaut. No one, especially not my family, ever had a clue. See, my parents thought Lucille was just some kooky relative with a modest pension and too many ceramic frog figurines. They'd always pitied her. Meanwhile, the first used to sneak over to her apartment every Sunday, where she'd teach me investing basics while we ate blueberry scones and played chess. She once told me that chess and business were the same game. Most people were too obsessed with being a queen, when really it's the pawn that gets underestimated, right up until it crosses the board. Anyway, let's talk about my actual family. My mom, Claudia, had a permanently raised eyebrow and a tone of voice that made compliments sound like critiques. She spent the last 2 decades trying to shape me into her personal PR project, the polished, Ivy League-bound daughter she could parade at brunches and charity auctions. Spoiler alert, I never played along. "Did that old bat leave us anything useful?" she asked the moment she saw the letter in my hands. We were standing in our kitchen, her kitchen, where I'd been temporarily staying after losing my fake job at the coffee shop. Long story. Kind of on purpose. I looked up from the envelope, eyes still wide. "Just books. And some old papers," she scoffed. Typical Lucille. Sentimental to the end. Then she paused. "You're not crying, are you?" "No. Just processing." "We'll process quickly. We're having dinner with the Carringtons tonight. Try not to look so frumpy." The Carringtons were one of those families obsessed with appearances. So naturally, my parents spent years trying to woo them into letting their golden child, my younger brother, Benji, marry into their bloodline. Benji was 22, fresh out of some overpriced business program he barely attended, and had never held a job for longer than a TikTok trend. But to my parents, he was the future. And I was just in the way. That night, I showed up to the Carrington dinner wearing a dark green wrap dress. My mother took one look and sneered. "You couldn't wear the pink one I picked out? That green makes you look tired. That pink one made me look like a human cupcake." Her jaw clenched, but before she could respond, Benji entered, late of course, and everyone melted like butter on hot toast. "My boy!" Dad boomed, hugging him like he hadn't seen him 5 minutes ago. "Fresh off the Forbes list, huh?" Forbes? Benji's last startup was a motivational app called Crush Life that mostly featured quotes from other apps. It flopped after 3 months. He blamed the algorithm, or Mercury in retrograde. Something like that. As the night went on, I watched my family perform for the Carringtons. It was painful. They gushed over Benji's natural genius, downplayed his failures, and casually dropped hints about arranging a marriage between him and Aubrey Carrington, who looked like she wanted to evaporate. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in the corner, sipping water and planning my empire. You see, as far as they knew, I was broke, jobless, living off their generosity. But what they didn't know was that the fake job at the coffee shop, that cafe, and the building it was in belonged to me. Actually, 3 blocks of downtown Portland did. My great aunt hadn't just left me a fortune. She left me blueprints. Over the next few weeks, I got to work. Quietly, strategically, I started shifting assets under new shell companies, reviewing debts, buying out notes on family properties, and tracing every dime they borrowed from friends and banks. And oh boy, there were so many dimes. Turns out Benji's failures weren't just harmless little flops. They were bleeding my parents dry. They'd maxed out credit lines, refinanced their home twice, and even sold Dad's vintage car to fund Benji's NFT business incubator. Spoiler, that also died. They were drowning in debt, all while pretending to be yacht rich on Instagram. They had no idea that the smiling face behind their newest creditor, Viridian Capital, was me. I watched as they started to unravel. The cleaner stopped showing up. The garden went wild. Mom suddenly got into sustainable fashion, aka thrift stores. But somehow, Benji kept showing up in new watches and sneakers, oblivious as ever. The real tipping point came one rainy Thursday. I was reviewing contracts in my actual office, a corner suite on the 20th floor of a glass tower downtown, when my assistant buzzed in. "Elsa, you're going to want to see this." She sent over a transaction alert. Benji had just pulled $160,000 from one of my parents' emergency credit lines to invest in a crypto vending machine business. You read that right. That was the final straw. "Freeze the line," I said. "Schedule foreclosure notices. And send flowers to Mom. It's about to get very real." And that's when the game truly began. A week after Benji dropped a small fortune into his crypto vending machine fantasy, the first foreclosure notice hit my parents' mailbox. According to my spreadsheet, color-coded of course, they had maybe 3 weeks left before everything unraveled publicly. I didn't enjoy watching them flail. Okay, maybe I enjoyed it a little. But it wasn't about being cruel. It was about finally peeling back the delusion they'd wrapped themselves in like a designer cashmere blanket. They needed to feel the cold air of reality. Still, it only took 2 days after the letter hit their doorstep for the calls to start. First came the text from my mom. "Can you come by the house tomorrow? It's important." Translation, we're broke, but let's pretend it's a conversation, not a cry for help. I showed up the next morning in jeans and a hoodie, the unemployed look they were used to, and knocked on the same double doors I used to dread walking through. Mom opened it with a forced smile, dressed in what used to be her grocery store outfit, the one she swore was just for errands. Except this time her makeup was thinner, and the worry was harder to hide. "Elsa," she said, like I was some ghost she hadn't summoned properly. "Hey." We sat in the kitchen, where the espresso machine had mysteriously vanished from the counter. A drip coffee maker sat in its place, looking guilty. "So, what's going on?" I asked, playing dumb. She sighed, brushing imaginary crumbs off the table. "We've hit a temporary setback. A liquidity issue, really. Your father's latest deal was delayed and, well, the bank's being dramatic." "Right. A bank that's technically me. I'm sorry to hear that. We're not asking for much," she said, her voice tightening. "Just some help to stay afloat until things stabilize." "You must have saved something from that cafe job. You mean the job you said was a hobby for failures?" She blinked. "Don't be difficult." "Sorry. It's just hard to forget being told I was an embarrassment to the family because I liked making coffee. You always twist things. I didn't argue. There was no point." She lived in a world where admitting fault felt like losing oxygen. "How much do you need?" I asked instead. She straightened up immediately. "Only 50,000. I almost choked. 50? It's not that much in the grand scheme. Think of it as an investment in your family." No, it was a band-aid on a bullet wound. I knew their full financial picture. 50 grand would keep the wolves at bay for maybe 2 weeks. Tops. "I don't have that kind of money," I lied. "Rent's due. Car needs repairs. You know how it is." Her lips thinned. "I guess some of us are more selfish than others." "Mom," I said gently, "you're asking your broke barista daughter for $50,000 while Benji just bought a new Rolex. Maybe the math isn't mathing." She flinched, then stood. "You know what? Forget I asked." But she wouldn't forget. Not really. Not now that the illusion of control was cracking. 3 days later, it was Dad's turn. He called me during my lunch break, or what they thought was my lunch break, while I was in my real office sipping sparkling water and finalizing a property acquisition in Lisbon. He started. "No one called me that but him, and only when he wanted something. I know your mother reached out. She was emotional. She didn't handle it well. I wanted to speak, man to woman, rationally. I had to hand it to him. He really knew how to play the dad negotiator role. Steady voice, strategic compliments, little pauses, as if he were giving me space to feel like I had control. But I'd spent years watching Aunt Lucille demolish billionaires in boardrooms using nothing but silence and eye contact. I wasn't 19 and desperate for his approval anymore. I hear you, I said. But I don't have that kind of money, and I don't think it's smart to bail out a situation that's not sustainable. There was a pause on the line. This family has a reputation to maintain, he said. Quieter now. The house, the club, Benji's future. We can't afford to look like failures. And there it was. The thing they feared more than homelessness, public embarrassment. Dad, I said softly, you're already in foreclosure. The bank owns your house. No, no. We worked something out. No, you didn't. And you know how I know that? He hesitated. What are you saying? I took a deep breath, stared out over the city skyline, and dropped the first bomb. I own the company that holds your mortgage. Silence. I bought it last year, along with the credit lines and the private loans you used to float Benji's ventures. You? He finally said. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I've spent the past 18 months watching you and Mom burn through cash like it's confetti, while pretending the house wasn't crumbling from the inside. That's absurd. No, what's absurd is refinancing your house 3 times to pay for Benji's jet ski collection. What's absurd is laughing at my job while begging for my savings. You didn't just mismanage money, you squandered it. His voice cracked. Lucille, this is her money, isn't it? I didn't answer. He already knew. This isn't what she would have wanted. You're right, I said. She would have handed you a check out of pity. But I'm not her. I'm me. And I believe in accountability. He hung up. After that, the silence lasted a whole week. No texts. No calls. Just quiet. Until the auction notice hit their doorstep. That's when things got loud again. Mom called, sobbing. Benji sent 3 voice notes, all in all caps energy, basically accusing me of ruining his momentum. And Dad, he sent a long email titled Disappointed in You. I read it while eating gelato in my office, watching the rain hit the windows. By then, I had already arranged everything, the auction schedule, the property transition, even the moving trucks. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I just wanted them to finally see what happens when the free ride ends. The real test came 2 days before the house auction. I stopped by unannounced. The place was almost unrecognizable. No cleaning staff, half the furniture gone, and the smell of reheated frozen dinners in the air. Benji was on the couch, scrolling through TikTok. Mom was at the dining table, filling out a budget worksheet like it was a foreign language. Dad stared blankly at a laptop. I stood in the doorway for a second. No one noticed, so I cleared my throat. Hi. All 3 turned like I'd just teleported in. What are you doing here? Mom asked. I came to talk. Offer you a deal. Benji scoffed. Oh, now you want to help? No, I offered to help. You ignored it. This is different. I handed Dad a manila envelope. Inside was a full breakdown of a repayment plan, new housing accommodations, and a clause removing Benji from all financial access. You're evicting us, he said flatly. No, the bank is. I'm offering you a place to land. You want us to beg? Mom asked. I want you to learn, I said. This house was a dream built on delusion. But I've bought you a real home, one you can afford, one you can grow in. Benji stood. This is messed up. I'm your brother. And you're 22 with no job, no skills, and a resume built on vibes. He turned red. You're a sociopath. I looked him dead in the eye. I'm just tired of being the family's doormat. They took the deal. What else could they do? The mansion sold 2 days later at auction. The new house I bought them was modest but comfortable, a 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood, with no pool or wine cellar, but plenty of sunlight. The following week, I watched them move in from across the street. Mom avoided eye contact. Dad barely nodded. Benji didn't show up, but I felt lighter, not triumphant, just done pretending. Aunt Lucille once told me that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about honesty, she said, and letting people see themselves, maybe for the first time. She was right. And this was only the beginning. After they moved into the new house, there was silence again. But this time, it felt different, not tense, not angry, just quiet. Like after a thunderstorm, when everything's wet and broken, but still, you could almost hear the sound of pride drying out in the sun. I didn't visit right away. They needed space to sit with the discomfort. For the first time in their lives, my parents were dealing with limits, budgets, public judgment, humility. And Benji? He disappeared off social media for a while, which, if you knew him, was like watching a bird stop, flapping its wings mid-flight. He'd gone from crypto king to couch surfer in record time. A week later, I got an alert on one of the financial monitoring dashboards I'd set up. Benji had applied for a job. I read the email twice, thinking maybe I'd hallucinated it. Retail associate. Entry level. I wasn't sure if I should laugh, cry, or send champagne. Instead, I did something else. I sent him lunch. Just a simple burrito bowl from a place near his new job. No note. No name on the order, but I knew he'd know. That night, he texted, "Thanks, it was weirdly thoughtful. Still hate you, though." I stared at the message longer than I should have. Then I just replied, "Good. Keep that energy. It'll get you through the shift." 2 weeks passed, then 3, and slowly I started hearing things, not from my family, but from their old world. The parties, the clubs, the private Facebook groups where people posted vacation pictures just to flex. Apparently, the Maxwell's fall from grace had become a bit of a local cautionary tale. People whispered. The Carringtons stopped returning texts. Their old friends suddenly had scheduling conflicts. That was the thing about their kind of social capital. It dried up faster than wine at a gala the moment the money ran out. But weirdly, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt sad. Because even after everything, they weren't evil. They were just lost. Caught in a cycle of appearances and comparison and competition. Chasing status like it was oxygen. And I was starting to realize I'd inherited something else from Lucille besides her money. The ability to see through people. The gift, or maybe curse, of noticing what they really valued. A month later, I finally went to visit. The new house was smaller, sure, but it was bright, tidy. There were potted plants in the kitchen, and a dented toaster that looked like it had been used. Mom opened the door. She looked tired, but less brittle, like maybe she'd finally stopped fighting the idea of being ordinary. "Elsa," she said, blinking like I was a dream she wasn't sure she liked. "Hey, I brought muffins." The tension in her shoulders dropped maybe an inch. "Blueberry? Always." She stepped aside. "Come in." Dad was at the dining table, working on a spreadsheet with reading glasses I'd never seen before. He looked up and gave me a stiff nod. "Hi, Dad." "Elsa." Silence. Then, awkwardly, he added, "You look, well." Translation: I know you're richer than the GDP of several countries, but I'm pretending I'm not impressed. Thanks. You too. Love this shirt. He glanced down at his faded polo. It was on sale. For a second, the three of us just stood there. No raised voices. No begging. No guilt. Just the weird, tentative awkwardness of people trying to learn each other from scratch. We sat in the living room, eating muffins off mismatched plates, like some kind of emotional hostage negotiation disguised as brunch. Eventually, Mom cleared her throat. I wanted to say thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For the house and the deal, and not leaving us out in the street." She glanced at Dad, who gave the smallest nod imaginable. "We didn't deserve it," she added. I didn't say anything, because they were right. But I also knew people don't grow when you punish them. They grow when they're forced to face the mirror. Lucille taught me that. And they were finally looking into one. Later that week, I checked in with Benji. He was stocking shelves at a home goods store, wearing a name tag, smelling like cardboard and pine-scented floor cleaner. "Wow," I said when I found him near the storage bins aisle. "A whole week without quitting. You good?" He rolled his eyes. "Not everyone lives in a skyscraper with a butler named Pierre or whatever. I don't have a butler. You probably own the building. Point due," he groaned. "But hey," I added, "you're still standing. That counts." He shoved a basket into place and sighed. "Look, I know I was an entitled jerk. I thought I was smart. Turns out I was just loud. That's the first step," I said. "Next step is being useful. I'm working on it. I've got ideas, God help us." He grinned. And for the first time in forever, it looked real. That weekend, I attended a networking event for women in finance. Normally, I didn't do those. Too many suits, too much ego. But I needed fresh blood for a project Lucille had dreamed of but never pulled off. A mentorship program for young women trying to break into business without trust funds or family backing. The idea was simple. Find women like me, underestimated, overlooked, and overqualified, and give them what no one gave me: opportunity. By the end of the evening, I had 6 new mentees, 2 potential board members, and a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy, about building something that outlasted petty power plays and social climbing and dinner party politics. Lucille had passed the torch, and now I was ready to light more fires. One afternoon, I walked into my favorite bookstore, the one I technically owned but still visited like a regular customer. The place smelled like old pages and fresh espresso. My kind of heaven. Sarah, the manager, waved me over. "You've got mail," she said, handing me a small envelope. No return address, just my name in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Inside was a photo. Me and Lucille, sitting on the floor, surrounded by books. I was maybe 7. She was mid-laugh, caught in motion, pointing at something just out of frame. On the back, in faded ink, she'd written, "The ones they dismiss are the ones who build empires. Let them sleep on you, then wake them up." I swallowed hard. That woman had known everything. Even back then, as I walked out of the shop that day, I passed by my old Civic parked across the street. It was still there. I hadn't sold it. Not because I couldn't, but because I liked remembering where I started, who I was before Lucille's empire became mine. The car was a reminder, not of being broke, but of being underestimated and surviving anyway. And that was priceless. There's this thing people don't tell you about climbing to the top. Once you're there, the air gets thinner, quieter, but not peaceful. Because now everyone's watching, waiting to see if you'll slip. And if you don't, they start trying to push. It had been about 5 months since the house auction. My family was finally stable. Not rich, not broke, just living. And weirdly, I liked that version of them better. Humble, grounded. Even Benji was still working now as a shift lead at his store. He'd stopped posting motivational quotes and started posting homemade sandwiches. Progress. Me? I was expanding Garnet Holdings into 3 new industries, reviewing proposals on flights, meeting with advisors over oat milk lattes, and finally building Lucille's dream mentorship program. We called it the Undone Project, a space for smart women who'd been overlooked, interrupted, or told to smile more. It was already catching fire. Articles, podcast interviews, quiet emails from women who said, "I thought I was alone until this." It felt good, like I was doing something that actually mattered. Not just growing money, but growing people. So naturally, that's when he showed up. Dorian Voss. Tall, smooth, the kind of guy who looked like he always had somewhere more important to be. CEO of a boutique venture capital firm in New York. I first met him at a Women in Business gala. I was a panelist. He was a donor. "You've got sharp instincts," he said after the event, swirling his wine like a movie villain. "I like sharp people." I smiled politely. "I like people who don't condescend during compliments." He laughed, unfazed. "Fair enough. You've got claws. That's rare in this industry." "Claws aren't rare. Most people just don't listen close enough to hear the scratch." He liked that, maybe a little too much. The next morning, I got a "Let's Connect" email. Very official. Attached was a pitch deck. Flashy, vague, full of buzzwords like synergy and disruption. He wanted Garnet to co-invest in a new fund targeting untapped female-led markets. It sounded good. But something about it made my skin itch. I'd seen too many people talk about empowering women when they really just meant profiting off them. Still, I didn't say no. Instead, I said, "Let's take a deeper look." Over the next few weeks, Dorian and I met more. Lunch meetings, Zoom calls, casual drinks that always came with an agenda. He was smart, smooth, the kind of guy who didn't blink when talking numbers in the hundreds of millions. But every time he spoke, I kept thinking, who taught you to sound this good without saying anything real? I started digging, not with a shovel, with spreadsheets. My legal team ran background checks. My analytics team ran simulations. I personally reviewed every page of his portfolio. And what I found? Smoke, mirrors, and a whole lot of nothing underneath. Turns out Dorian's firm had a history of dressing up losses as strategic pivots. Half his advisory board had bailed 6 months ago. And one of his biggest success stories was actually under quiet federal investigation for misreporting profits. Classic Wolf in tailored wool move. But what made me really pause? One of his silent backers had been involved in a hostile takeover of a women-led wellness company, the same company Lucille had helped launch 15 years ago. That wasn't just shady. That was personal. So I asked for one more meeting. We met at this rooftop bar he'd suggested. Trendy place. Low lighting, drinks with names like Cognitive Dissonance and Capitalist Crush. He was already seated when I arrived, sipping something in a copper mug. He smiled like a shark. Elsa, I was hoping you'd say yes. I wanted to talk in person before I made a decision. He raised an eyebrow. You're a rare one. Most people don't do this much homework before cutting checks. Most people don't own the boardroom they're sitting in. He grinned. I like that. So, what's the verdict? I pulled out a folder, paper, not digital. I wanted to see his reaction when he saw the receipts. I think your pitch is impressive, but your numbers don't add up, and your track record is optimistic at best. His smile twitched. I kept going. I also think you intentionally left out your connection to Merritt Holt, who, if you recall, tanked Havenwell after slashing 80% of its female leadership and redirecting funds into executive bonuses. His smile disappeared entirely. This isn't just a pass, Dorian. This is a blacklist. He leaned back, face unreadable now. That's a strong word. So was integrity. You used it 6 times in your deck. Silence. Then, calmly, you've made a powerful enemy. I leaned forward. No, I made a clean choice. I left him there, in his rooftop kingdom of overpriced cocktails and ego, and on the elevator ride down, I sent a single text to my team, Blacklist Voss. Inform network. Quietly, but firmly. Also, add Havenwell's founders to the Undone Project invite list. You don't beat a predator by yelling. You beat them by starving them out of the ecosystem. The fallout came fast. Within days, other firms pulled out of Dorian's fund. 2 media outlets, ones I'd quietly supported, started sniffing around old lawsuits. He went dark on socials, unsubscribed from everything. By the end of the month, his name was synonymous with toxic leadership in several private investor forums. I didn't celebrate, but I did sleep better. Because this time, the game wasn't about revenge. It was about defense. For the women behind me, the ones still fighting for credibility, funding, respect. If Lucille gave me anything besides money, it was a sense of responsibility. She used to say, if you make it to the top and don't send the elevator back down, then you were never built to lead. You were just lucky. I wasn't lucky. I was ready. That same week, Benji called. He sounded excited. I have an idea. I braced myself. God help us. No, listen, it's a budgeting app, but gamified. Like, you earn rewards for hitting savings goals. And it's actually fun, like Duolingo meets Mint. I blinked. That's not horrible. Thanks? No, I mean it. That's probably the best idea you've ever had. He laughed. I've been testing a prototype with a few coworkers. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but it's the first thing I've cared about in years. And just like that, I felt it again. That weird, fragile hope that maybe people really can change when you give them the space. And the reason, too. Send me the demo when you're ready, I said. But don't expect a check unless it's solid. Deal. And hey, thanks, Elsa. Not just for the sandwich. For all of it. I didn't cry, but I got real close. Make me proud, I said. I'm trying. And for once, I believed him. That night, I walked past the Civic in my garage. Still dented. Still running. I could have replaced it with 100 other cars. Flashy ones. Quiet ones. Ones with doors that open like wings. But I kept it. Because that car had been with me through the pretending, the plotting, the rising, the revenge. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol. A promise to never forget what it felt like to be counted out. And a reminder that just because someone wears a suit or smiles at your success doesn't mean they're on your side. Sometimes the wolves don't howl, they just wait. And sometimes you have to be the storm they never saw coming. I wasn't expecting the call. It came on a rainy Tuesday, right after I'd wrapped a mentorship roundtable. My assistant buzzed in, her voice hesitant. It's your mom. She says it's important. I almost ignored it. We'd settled into this polite, distant rhythm, like neighbors who nod from across the street but never stop to chat. We'd done enough damage control. We didn't owe each other anything more. Still, something in her tone stayed with me. So I picked up. Elsa, she said, breath tight, like she'd been crying but didn't want me to know. It's your father. He collapsed. My stomach dropped. Not because I was still close with him, we weren't, but because I'd never imagined him weak. My father was always noise and pride, jawlines and suits, the kind of man who shook hands too hard and made you'll understand when you're older, his personal slogan. I drove straight to the hospital. Rain slapped against the windshield, and for the first time in years, I found myself gripping the wheel the same way I had in college, when I was broke and worried about tire pressure, praying I wouldn't have to choose between gas and groceries. Funny how memory works. All it takes is a little fear, and suddenly you're 19 again, parking in the farthest spot to avoid valet fees. He had a mild stroke, not life-ending, but life-changing. I stood at the end of the hospital bed while Mom sat in the corner, arms folded, too still. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. "Is he awake?" I asked. She nodded. "They say he might be fine, eventually, but his speech is a little off, and his right side is weaker." I looked at the man in the bed, pale, quiet. The same man who once told me real strength never needs help. Now he couldn't lift his right hand without shaking. Something about it cracked me open a little. "Does he know I'm here?" "He does." She hesitated. "Elsa, he asked for you." "Not the nurse. You." I wasn't ready for that. But I walked closer. His eyes flicked toward me. One corner of his mouth twitched, trying to smile. It didn't quite land. "Hey," I said, voice low. "Heard you decided to scare the hell out of everyone." He blinked slowly. Maybe a smirk, maybe just a muscle spasm. But his eyes were alert. There was still him in there. I pulled the chair closer and sat down. "Okay, Dad," I said. "Let's try this again. No yelling, no lectures. Just two people figuring things out." He squeezed my hand, and for the first time in my adult life, he didn't try to lead, he just listened. The next few days blurred together. Hospitals always feel like that. Bad lighting. Vending machines pretending to offer nutrition. People pacing hallways, waiting for answers no one wants to give out loud. I stayed longer than I meant to. Part of me kept saying it was just logistics. Making sure the insurance lined up. Overseeing his transition to rehab. Coordinating home care support. But the truth? A deeper part of me was starting to grieve the version of him I'd spent years resenting. Because when someone loses their armor, when all they have is hospital gowns and quiet eyes, you start seeing the parts they never knew how to show. On the third night, Mom sat beside me in the waiting room with 2 cups of instant coffee. "You didn't have to stay this long," she said. "I know." She sipped, then asked something I never thought I'd hear from her. "Were we always this? Fake?" The question hit hard. "I don't think we meant to be," I said. "I think we just kept trying to catch up to people who didn't care if we existed." She nodded slowly, like she was letting herself admit it for the first time. "I thought if we looked successful, we'd feel successful. But now, the silence in that house is loud." I looked over at her. She was older now, more human, less armor. "Success isn't quiet, Mom," I said gently. "But peace is." By the end of the week, we'd moved Dad into a long-term recovery center. Small place, beautiful gardens, good staff. I paid the first 6 months in full and didn't say a word about it. Benji showed up the next morning, looking more serious than I'd seen him in years. He hugged me. Not a quick, one-armed, performative thing. A real hug. "You okay?" he asked. "Are you?" He gave me a crooked smile. I brought him a Sudoku book. Figured I'd help him do a page a day. Smart. He paused. "You think he's scared?" I didn't lie. "Yeah. Probably more than he wants to admit." Benji sat down beside me. "We've still got time to do this better, right?" That one hit me. Because maybe that's what we'd all been dancing around for years. The quiet, buried truth that we wanted to fix things, but didn't know how to start. Now the start had been forced on us. And somehow, that felt like a gift. A week later, I went back to my office. Everything was where I'd left it. Glass walls, city views, framed photos. But I felt different now. Like I was carrying something heavier, but not in a bad way. More like armor that finally fit. I sat at my desk and pulled out a letter I'd been avoiding for months. Lucille's final note. Not the short one that came with the inheritance. The real one. The one she'd left with her lawyer, sealed and dated for me to read once I'd understood the cost of power. I opened it. "Elsa, if you're reading this, you've probably already made decisions that cost you more than money. That's how it works. The world will always try to make you feel like you're too much or not enough. Don't believe it. You weren't born to be soft for the comfort of others. You were born to be whole, and sometimes wholeness makes other people uncomfortable. Remember this: revenge is satisfying, but forgiveness? That's where freedom lives. Use both wisely. Love always. Lucille, I sat there for a while, holding that letter like it was a mirror, because she was right. I'd used revenge to set boundaries. I'd used power to carve out space. But now, it was time to figure out what healing looked like, what rebuilding looked like, not just of a family, but of trust, of identity. That weekend, I invited my mom and Benji over for dinner. Not a holiday. No big reason. Just food, wine, music. I cooked, nothing fancy. Pasta. Garlic bread. That lemon salad Lucille used to make. At first it was a little stiff, but then Benji cracked a dumb joke, and Mom laughed for real, and something eased between us. Over dessert, I pulled out a small box. Inside, a stack of old photos I'd found at Lucille's house. Some with me and her, others with my parents. A few with all of us, years before things got complicated. Mom's eyes misted over. Benji held up one where Dad looked impossibly young, holding me in one arm and a bottle of champagne in the other. I don't remember this day, I said. He'd just landed a huge contract, Mom whispered. We thought it was the beginning of forever. Maybe it was. Maybe it still could be. Just a different version. One built not on showrooms and savings accounts, but on truth. And this time we were finally starting from something real. It's strange how endings never announce themselves. They don't knock on your door with banners and brass bands. They just show up, quietly, in the way someone looks at you differently, in the way silence settles without tension, in the way you finally exhale without realizing you'd been holding your breath for years. That's how I knew this part of my life, the part shaped by survival, secrecy, revenge, was coming to a close. And I had one last move to make, not to hurt, but to heal. A few weeks after that dinner with my mom and Benji, I sat in my office late into the evening, the city outside pulsing in warm golds and slow blues. The day had been a blur, meetings, calls, more meetings, but my thoughts kept drifting, not to deals or strategy, to Lucille, to everything she taught me without teaching. The way she led with quiet confidence, made space without asking for permission, and always left room for people to surprise her, both in failure and redemption. Her empire was built on numbers, but her legacy, that was built on people. And I realized something that night. I didn't just want to be rich, or powerful, or feared. I wanted to be trusted, respected, not because I held the cards, but because I played them differently. So I opened a blank document and started writing. A plan, not for the company, for the next generation of women like me. The ones too smart to stay overlooked, too strong to stay silent, but too burned out to start alone. I called it Garnet Collective, a full-scale initiative that went beyond funding. It would offer mentorship, legal resources, operational help, even therapy stipends. Because the truth was, no one talked about how heavy success could be, or how many women burned out from trying to build while also healing. This would change that. It would be Lucille's final act, carried forward through me, and maybe through others. The next day, I drove to the recovery center. Dad had been there 6 weeks now. His speech was clearer. He could walk short distances. He hated being helped, but had finally stopped calling the physical therapist kid. I found him sitting in the garden, watching the koi pond like it owed him an explanation. "Hey," I said, sitting next to him. He nodded. "You're here. You sound good." He chuckled, voice still a little gravel. "Yeah, well, you try getting your tongue to work again. It's humbling, I bet." Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. "I used to think needing help meant I failed," he said suddenly. "Now, I think refusing it is the real failure." I blinked, caught off guard. He turned to me, slower now. "Elsa, I know I wasn't the father you needed. I chased things that didn't matter. I let your brother coast. I let your mother sink. Stop," I said gently. "I forgave you already. Not because you earned it, but because I didn't want to carry it anymore." His eyes misted. He looked away. "Lucille would be proud of you," he said. "I hope so." "No," he said. "I know so." We sat there a while, both watching the fish and saying nothing, and maybe for the first time ever we were just people, not roles, not grudges, just human beings trying again. That weekend, I officially launched Garnet Collective. I held the event at one of Lucille's old venues, a historic library turned art space with stained glass windows and velvet chairs that felt like they'd been waiting for a revolution to walk in. The invite list wasn't flashy, it was intentional. Founders, survivors, risk takers, rebuilders, women who'd been passed over for funding, girls just out of school with ideas no one took seriously, single moms, engineers, bakers, artists. I stood on that stage and told them the truth, that we'd been taught to measure success by things we could lose, titles, money, praise. But the real power that lived in what no one could take, resilience, vision, voice. You don't have to be loud to be heard, I told them. You don't have to be mean to be strong. And you don't have to ask permission to take up space. The room went quiet in the best way, that kind of stillness when people are listening with more than their ears. When I finished, they stood. Not for me, but for each other. After the event, Benji pulled me aside. He was dressed in his best startup casual outfit, holding a plate of tiny desserts he clearly didn't know the names of. This was wild, he said. Like, real, inspiring. Thanks, I said, surprised he meant it. He hesitated, then added, You think you'd ever let me pitch Garnet one day? Not for charity, just to earn it? I looked at him. This brother I'd once resented. This kid who'd grown up a little more each day since we hit rock bottom, only if your pitch deck doesn't include Comic Sans. He laughed. Deal. Later, I found my mom sitting alone in the lounge, looking out over the garden courtyard. You okay? I asked, sitting beside her. She nodded. I'm proud of you. I know. I don't say it enough. I used to think I needed you to say it all the time. Now, I just need you to believe it. She reached for my hand, held it like she wasn't used to it, but wanted to learn how. I do, she said, and for what it's worth, I'm learning too. We sat there, side by side, watching the wind rustle through the ivy like it had somewhere to be. A few nights later, I was back home. Just me. Glass of wine in hand. Feet up. No meetings. No phones. I took out the photo of me and Lucille again, the one where she was laughing mid-sentence, eyes wild with mischief and wisdom. I placed it on the bookshelf in my office, right next to the frame of Garnet's first official grant recipient, a 23-year-old Latina founder building solar-powered irrigation for low-income farms. 2 generations of women who refused to be underestimated. And maybe I was somewhere in the middle, bridging what was and what's possible. Before I went to bed, I walked into the garage. The Civic was still there, still dented, still running, but beside it, under a silk tarp, was the new car I'd finally allowed myself to buy, a sleek, silver electric beast. I hadn't driven it yet. Not because I was ashamed, but because I'd learned something important. You don't have to prove who you are anymore once you know who you are. That night, I stood between the past and the future, one hand resting on each car, and I smiled. Because I wasn't just rich. I wasn't just right, I was whole. And that was the real inheritance. Story 2. Something broke inside of me when I noticed my daughter sitting by herself on the bench as the other students in her class gathered for their class photo. She wasn't in tears. She wasn't upset. With her hands folded in her lap as if to blend in, she simply sat there in silence. I had just seen her instructor whisper to another staff member while leaning in. She is not dressed appropriately. Suddenly they informed my daughter, who is 9 years old, that she wasn't worthy of being seen. Some children chuckled. One youngster said, "Is that from a thrift store?" pointing to her clothing. I saw her droop her head. She remained silent. She didn't defend herself. Holding the paper cups I had offered to bring for photo day, I stood still. I had trembling hands. I wanted to scream and go over. I didn't want to make things worse for Lyra, but I needed to express my feelings about that instructor. A black automobile then came up in front of the school as I was ready to walk to my car. A man carrying a professional camera emerged in a black suit. He straightened his tie, grinned, and turned to face my daughter. He said, "Let's work some magic." Even though our mornings were usually a little chaotic, we made an effort to make picture day extra memorable. In order to iron Laura's outfit, I had risen an hour earlier than normal. The breast was covered with small embroidered stars and was sky blue. It wasn't particularly extravagant, but it was her favorite. 3 months prior, she had selected it from a church charity basket. The shoulders were a bit large, and the hem was a bit short, but as she spun in circles, she adored the way the skirt whirled. "Baby, come on in." With a comb in one hand and a buttered bagel in the other, I yelled from the kitchen. "Let's do your hair well." Silently, Leora shuffled in. She was never a big fan of getting up early. Like a shadow, her oversized bag trailed behind her. She got up when I patted the chair and peered at me in the mirror. We had used masking tape to adhere to the rear of a cabinet. "Do I look all right?" With her fingers intertwined in her lap, she asked quietly. "You look stunning." As I swept her dark hair into a ponytail, I spoke. "Beautiful." The fourth-grade girl with the most beauty. She made an effort to smile, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Unlike the other children in her class, Leora was unique. While the other girls were preoccupied with dancing fads and fancy bags, she was quiet, introspective, and prone to losing herself in her own world. Lyra's arithmetic assignment has hummingbirds drawn in the corners. Her heart was tender, the type that was prone to bruises. She had become more inward looking after her father's death 2 years prior, as if her soul had found a place to curl up in. We were barely getting by. I spent my evenings cleaning downtown offices, and my mornings working at a neighborhood cafe. There were many nights when dinner consisted of nothing but toast and eggs, since every dollar had to be stretched. However, I made every effort to maintain Lyra's normalcy. She didn't voice any complaints, not once. A week before, she had tacked the photo day flyer on the fridge and circled the date with pink marker. "Are you able to attend class on that day?" she inquired. "Parents can assist with setup," they suggested. I called in to let them know I couldn't make it, even though I had already accepted an additional shift that morning. Why, didn't Lyra ask? She simply thanked me and gave me a hug. I took special care while packing her lunch that morning. I even managed to sneak in a cookie that I had saved from the tip jar at the diner. As usual, we walked together to school, hand in hand, past automobiles that hummed rather than rattled, past homes with well-kept lawns. I made an effort to ignore the other children dressed in more modern attire and the mothers sipping lattes while wearing yoga pants. Nor did I want Lyra to notice. As we approached the school, she reduced her speed. She tightened her hold on my fingers. "I hope my clothing pleases Mrs. Kilburn," she whispered. Fixing a wayward hair behind her ear, I knelt next to her. "Lyra, my dear, what you love, you wear. It's unique because of that. No one has to approve of you." Although she nodded, it was clear that she wasn't persuaded. A group of parents and instructors had already gathered around the gym entrance when we arrived at the front stairs. The entryway is framed by balloons, and little props and food were placed on a folding table. There were little chalkboards with phrases like "Class of 2033" and "Picture Perfect." Miss S. Kilburn was standing close by. Her mouth pursed into what she likely believed to be a grin. She held a clipboard. She was the type of instructor who constantly seemed to be smelling something disagreeable. Lyra waved slightly, but the woman did not return the gesture. Instead, she paused for a moment and quickly glanced at Lyra's attire. Too much time. My stomach twisted. I put down my bag of paper cups and crouched down next to my kid once again. "You'll do fantastically. All right? Simply be who you are. All you ever require to be all right," she muttered. She inhaled deeply before approaching the group. I remained behind, observing her little figure in the company of the other children. She appeared quite proud at that time. So prepared, so optimistic. I would never have released her hand if I had known what was about to happen. Lyra anxiously smoothed the front of her dress as she stood with the rest of her class on the gym's edge. She was constantly adjusting her ponytail, attempting to tuck in the straggling strands, and examining the small mirror in her palm. She was acting in a way that many children do when they try to fit in, quietly trying to get smaller, neater, and more undetectable. With a stack of napkins I had packed, I stood apart from the other parents. The gym smelled of cupcakes and hairspray, and it was warm. The children were giddy with anticipation. A photographer was in front of the improvised background, adjusting lighting apparatus. The sky is blue-gray, clouds painted. Across the top are the words "Class of 2033" in gold lettering. The voice of Miss S. Kilburn broke through the commotion. "All right, everybody, locate a friend and form a height-based line." The children hurried into lines. Uncertain of where to go, Lyra lingered close to the rear. She was obviously apprehensive, shorter than most of the lads, and taller than some of the girls. Her eyes were darting about, searching for a spot where she would fit in, and I could see it. It happened at that moment. Miss S. Kilburn leaned over and spoke to the teaching assistant next to her in a whisper. Even though I couldn't hear it well, I managed to pick out one sentence that really got to me. She is not dressed appropriately. After giving Lyra a quick glance, the assistant gave a little nod. Lyra, dear, Mrs. Kilburn called in a condescending tone that was sweet and cloying. Why don't you wait a little while over there near the bench? Lyra seemed perplexed. Hesitantly, she moved forward. Miss S. Kilburn responded, her eyes not seeing the smile, just for a moment. The class layout is something we're working on. For Lyra, I witnessed the moment it clicked. She paused. Without a word, she turned and went to the wooden bench on the gym's side, where she sat and folded her hands in her lap. It was not missed by the other children. There was one youngster, the kind that had something nasty to say all the time, laughed, I suppose. Choose your days just for mall shoppers. Someone else chuckled. Nice outfit. Goodwill girl. With my entire body frozen up, I was unable to move. My daughter. While the other students in her class prepared to be photographed, my lovely, courageous, and quiet kid was sitting by herself. The instructor didn't explicitly state that she couldn't be in the photo. She did something worse now. She gave her a sense of alienation. I moved forward a step. My jaw dropped. I had something to say. I wanted to insist that they take her into account. However, I halted. What am I about to enter? Would I be known as the irate mother? Would Leonora be even more humiliated by it? Already she was hunched down, like a flower that closes in the cold. I had a look around. The other parents remained silent. Some were too preoccupied to talk. The statement had undoubtedly been heard by a few. They averted their gaze. In an attempt to quiet the tempest that was building inside of me, I bent down and pretended to tidy the napkins I had brought. I continued to look back at Lyra. She didn't weep. I was really gutted by that. She didn't even appear distressed, merely resigned, as if she has seen this before, as if she already knew how the world saw females like her. Her flash click was not used in the class photo. Laughter. I stood still, trying not to break down or cry in front of strangers. From then on, the event came to a swift end. Juice boxes were seized by children. Selfies were taken by parents with their kids. Lyra's fists were now clenched in her lap as she stayed on the bench. It wasn't until the throng started to thin out that she moved. She approached me carefully. Her eyes remained dull and dry. Can we leave right now? Quietly, she asked. I gave a nod. Yes, come on. Together, we left the gym without saying a word. This time, I held her hand more tightly. Detective, ferocious. The sun had begun to peek through the clouds outside. However, I just experienced chilly. Do you want to do your own picture day? I asked her as we arrived at the parking lot's edge. She gave me a perplexed expression. What are you saying? We don't need them to see you, really. All we need is the appropriate lens. I took out my phone at that point and sent Devin Vega a text. It had been over a year since we last spoke. Not since he relocated to a larger city in order to serve more private customers. Prior to the accident, he worked with my husband James. Back then, Devin was the greatest wedding photographer I had ever seen. He had assisted us in taking one of our very few family photos. We're all three grinning in our garden beneath a tree. Lyra is lifted onto James's shoulders. For a moment, my fingers lingered over the keyboard. I typed after that. Hello, do you still take pictures? If at all possible, I need something special today. For Lyra, that is. I pressed send and began to move. I haven't yet told Lyra anything. Her footsteps were heavy and dragging next to me, as if she were attempting to blend in with each step. We started toward the small hill behind the school, where the pickup area stops and the sidewalk starts. After passing the playground and going through the parking lot, in my palm, my phone buzzed. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Declare the word. I'll be present. My chest constricted. I returned 2 words to the keyboard. Come, please. I took a seat on the curb with Lyra on the edge of a low stone wall. The light was warm against our faces now that it was higher. I gave her a juice box after reaching inside my bag, for after the occasion I had brought. Silently, she sipped, prodded the straw in, and gazed at the floor. Devin, do you remember? Gently, I inquired. She didn't glance up as she nodded. The guy with the camera? Yes. The person who shot that photo of you and your father in the garden with the hose. She almost smiled as her mouth moved. He's on his way to snap your photo, I said. Only for you. Not because he was ordered to. He recognizes your uniqueness, not because of a list or a backdrop. Then she lifted her eyebrows slightly as she glanced at me. Why? Since you weren't seen in there today. I pointed back in the direction of the school. But he will, and I did. She stretched out and took my hand without saying anything. Minutes went by. I continued to look around the street. Then I noticed it. Shining like it had just rolled off the lot, the sleek black automobile pulled up to the curb. It was a hilariously inappropriate sight in front of the primary school. Devin Vega emerged when the door opened. He had the same appearance. His shirt was slightly unbuttoned, his gray blazer was fitting, and he was dressed in black pants, giving him the appearance of someone who would fit in a magazine. A strap over his breast held a matte, black DSLR. He looked across the pavement, saw us, and grinned. He walked over and shouted out to Lyra, "I've heard that we have a picture. An emergency." Lyra blinked. She gazed at him, as though he were not real. Devin dropped on his knees before her. "My name is Devin. You were young when we first met. I used to use a camera to follow you around. You detested it." She hardly raised her voice beyond a whisper. "I no longer despise it." He smiled. "I prefer to hear that. Are you prepared to work some magic?" She gave me a doubtful look. "Just if you'd like to," I said quietly. Lyra gave a nod. We crossed the field to a little tree grove behind the school. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, their fragile petals falling like little pink snowflakes with each wind. Devin immediately set up, changing lenses, adjusting his perspective, and setting a light reflector on the grass. He fired a practice shot, examined the screen, looked at Lyra. "All right," he said. "Let's do one in which you just stand up. You seem to be dreaming of something enormous as you stare past me with your arms relaxed and your chin up." She succeeded. "Perfect," he said. "Click right now. Let me whirl around a bit. Twirl your hair, that's all. Click, click, click." Lyra grinned. A genuine smile. It's not a school picture. Make a genuine smile. Before you can stop it, it pops out, sneaking up on you. Devin brought his camera down. He answered, "You're a natural." She smiled. With my arms folded over my chest, I stood to the side. I would weep if I couldn't keep myself together. Not because I was chilly, not out of melancholy, from the immense relief of witnessing the return of her brightness. It was more than simply a picture session. She was quietly recovering her value, a gentle yet impactful reminder that she was important. And someone was catching it this time. Devin showed Lyra the camera's back. Blinking at the screen as if unsure, she leaned closer. That girl. She was indeed strong, bright, and gleaming in the gentle sunlight. The pictures made her appear older, not in a depressing manner. It seemed as though she had entered a new phase, rather than as though the weight of the world had aged her. Like someone who stood strong enough to be remembered after having witnessed the worst of her day. She blinked and remarked, "I look good." Devin said, "You look like yourself." That's more than satisfactory. It's not common. She grinned once more. It came all the way to her eyes that time. As she fiddled with a neighboring branch, clutching a single cherry blossom between her fingers like a little crown, he took a few more images. I knew it had done its job then. Like the moment. The wind calmed, the light softened, and Laura breathed, as if she had finally released a burden she had been carrying for years. Devin left. "The modifications will be sent to you tonight. Prince will be with you tomorrow. There's no need to hurry," I said. He gave me that smile of an old friend. That one that made me think of James. The first due, indeed. Believe me. Just as the final few parents were leaving, chatting and packing up their remaining balloons into the back of a minivan, we made our way back to the front of the school. The assistant who had stood calmly next to Miss S. Kilburn during the exclusion earlier that morning was receiving orders from her as I saw her at the gym entrance with a clipboard under her arm. She turned to face us. She glanced at Devin, then at the camera dangling over his shoulder, then back at me. Next, Leora. She took a second look. Laura had stopped staring at the floor and dragging her feet. She was keeping my hand while walking straight and with her shoulders back. We came to a halt next to the gate. I said nothing at all. Devin, though, lacked such self-control. He gave her a sleek black card that he had taken out of his wallet. Studios in Vegas. He smiled casually as he said, "Everyone is welcome to get in touch the next time." He didn't hold off till she answered. He turned back to us and saluted Lyra in a light-hearted manner. You were amazing today." She smiled and waved a little to him. Miss S. Kilburn remained silent, simply stared down at the card as if it were about to bite her. After getting into the car, we headed home. As if the planet were attempting to start over, we let the spring breeze blow over our hair. Lyra murmured a small song to herself while resting her head on the bench. It had been a while since she had done that. She immediately rushed to the bookcase and took out the old picture Devon had taken years prior as soon as we arrived home. James hoisting her into the air in that picture, they both chuckle in the middle. After a minute of staring at it, she turned to face me. Would Daddy have approved of the photos, in your opinion? I made no hesitation at all. All of them would have been framed by him. He most likely shows them to strangers and keeps them in his wallet. She laughed. The sort that rises like bubbles from a deep start. Do you think he would place one on the refrigerator? To free up room, he would remove the grocery list. She gave a nod. Really? Excellent. So I also want to place one there. Devon emailed the files after she went to bed that night. Each picture was superior to the one before it. Her face glowed as if it had been on fire from within. The way her hair fluttered in the breeze. The petals froze in the middle of autumn. She stood in her garment with pride. Everything had the appearance of a magazine spread. And not only due to Devon's talent, because Leonora had been spotted that day, actually observed, not for the things she had lost, for who she was, not for what she lacked. Steady and gentle, courageous and thoughtful. The picture of her staring straight into the lens was the one I printed out. Her lips slightly parted as if she were going to utter something significant. I put it on the refrigerator next to the photo of the old hose and James. 2 seconds. 2 moments of reality. She was hoisted into the air one day. She also learned how to stand by herself one day. Laura walked directly to the refrigerator as soon as she woke up the following morning. Her pajama bottoms were too short at the ankles, and her hair was still wild from sleep. But when she saw it, her expression brightened. The picture of her and James was printed, trimmed, and placed neatly next to the one of her that Devon had handed over at midnight. Her smile was directly illuminated by the light streaming in from the kitchen window. Quietly, she stood and studied it. After a minute, she remarked, "I like it. You ought to. You appear to be superhuman." I gave her a piece of toast while I spoke. She grinned at the picture once more. Then it was whispered, "Yesterday, I didn't feel like one. Yesterday, you were one," I said. "You showed courage." She rested her head on my arm after taking a bite out of the bread. "Have you informed Devon?" "Thank you," I responded. I did, but I believe he was already aware. I received a call from the school's front desk that afternoon. It sounded as though the secretary was reading from a script because of how rigid her voice was. She informed me that Miss S. Kilburn had requested to talk to me. "Was it about yesterday?" I inquired. After a pause, there was silence. Indeed, I didn't go. She didn't have to explain herself to me. I didn't want a canned apology or a sterile justification of how miscommunications or policies caused the incident. Laura was more aware of what had transpired than I was. She sensed it. We may recognize our value without being welcomed into every room. In any case, some spaces aren't designed to accommodate the correct individuals. I printed 5 additional pictures instead. Laura's art instructor, who had always supported her creativity, received one from me. My mother sobbed when she saw the one I mailed her. Tucked down within a book I hadn't been able to complete since James's death, I'd kept one for myself. One was taken to school by Lyra. When she arrived that day, she said very little. After putting the picture in her folder, she proceeded directly to the library after passing Miss S. Killian's classroom. She spent the whole lunch break sketching cherry blossoms around a camera, with the word "scene" written in large block letters at the top of the page, according to what her art instructor subsequently informed me. I brought her to the neighborhood print shop that weekend to get her drawing made into a poster. On the door of her bedroom, we hanged it. A few weeks later, I received a Facebook message from another mother from the school. Devon showed me the photos he shot. Oh, lovely. Laura's photogenic abilities were unknown to me. "She has always been stunning," I answered. All she needed was the correct lens. Since this article wasn't for them, I didn't need to hear back. It was for every youngster who has ever been left out of the picture and for every parent who has seen their child deteriorate because of the criticism of others. Laura didn't need a manufactured backdrop. matching clothes, or approval from those who couldn't see her in the first place, which is a lesson for every girl who has been told she isn't good enough because her shoes aren't brand new, her dress isn't trendy, or her voice isn't loud. She needed someone to take charge and tell her that her identity is more important than her attire. Months later, the picture is still on our refrigerator, and each time I walk by it, I am reminded of the silent power of visibility. It doesn't require a big gesture or a viral event. Sometimes all you need is a camera, a black automobile, a buddy who is there when you need them most, and a lady who realizes that her worth is unquestionable. She recently informed me that she hopes to work as a photographer. I want to take pictures of kids who feel invisible and give them a superhero vibe, she added. She already has, I informed her, because she demonstrated to the world what it looks like to ascend long before she even took up a camera, and that is, in a sense, the most potent image of all. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who deserves to see it if it moved you. Also, let me know in the comments. Have you ever made your own path to be seen or stood up for someone who felt invisible? Tell me your tale, please. Story 3. I was given a funeral. My mom wept, yet she didn't cry a tear. In agony, my sister read a eulogy I wrote as though it were her own. They believed I had vanished forever. However, the church doors opened, and I entered alive as my favorite song was performed on the piano. I was constantly aware that I didn't fit in. I sensed it even as a little child. The way my mother treated Emily as though she were a piece of glass, and me as though I were the fracture that broke it. Everyone wanted Emily as a daughter because of her easy charm and lovely hair. The other one was me, the too sensitive one, the silent one. The person who wept inappropriately and asked too many questions. Dad said very little. He didn't. Mom's savage tongue was worse than his quiet. It seemed more empty, as if I were completely non-existent. Being raised in the Morgan home meant that everyone was always comparing smiles, posture, attire, and academics. Emily always prevailed. She had a knack for winning, and without doing a thing, she was able to defeat me. She would chuckle just loud enough for me to hear, say something to her mother in private, and leave me wondering what I had done wrong once more. I had given up attempting to get noticed by the time I was 28. I left home. I stopped attending birthday celebrations and family holidays. Perhaps the distance might reset something, I reasoned. They could miss me. They did not make a call. Ceased. No one responded to the messages. That year, I didn't even have a happy Christmas. When I sent a present to Grandma, Emily joked about it online and wrote a story about it, calling it a strange anonymous package. I don't want to confess how much that hurt, so I simply left one day. I purchased a one-way ticket and packed my bags to leave Ashridge. No explanation, no farewell, no letter. I didn't want to be pursued by them. I was curious about what they would do in my absence. They took no action. Weeks went by. Months followed by a year. I began anew. I had counseling. I even changed my name for a period as well as my hairstyle and phone number. I believed I was getting better. I believed I was losing my memory. As a matter of fact, though, you never forget what it's like to be regarded like a ghost that is still alive. My college closest friend Lena called me 3 years later, the only person with whom I had maintained contact. Claire. Her voice was tight with a mixture of anger and incredulity as she spoke. Your household? You are being given a funeral. It was weird, not hilarious, which is why I laughed, like seeing the unfolding of another person's life in real time. An obituary that was posted on Emily's profile was the link that she forwarded to me. My name. Born on April 17th. My photo subject. Claire Elizabeth Morgan, passed away overseas. Missed by more, loved by many. Who actually is loved? I read the comments and scrolled. In high school, she sent prayers to the family and was very sweet. Peace be with you, lovely soul. Mom even posted something. Despite all of her hardships, we always loved Claire. She is now at peace. Calm. They didn't even call. I was never reported missing. Never made an effort to get in touch. Even with Lena. They wanted to say they loved me now. I didn't get upset. Not quite yet. I felt empty. But as soon as I saw where the funeral was being held, Church of St. Elora, this Sunday around 10 a.m., a peculiar peace fell over me. They wanted me gone. They wanted a version of the tale they could control. They wanted to read my obituary, weep crocodile tears, and walk away with the pure memory of a girl they opted to delete. All right, let them have it. Let them bury the spirit of Claire Morgan. I'll be there to make sure she doesn't remain dead. I arrived at Ashridge 2 days before the funeral. I wore a dark cap, sunglasses, and an enormous coat, the type of disguise you'd think was overly theatrical in real life, until you remembered that in tiny communities, your face is the news. And mine had just been splashed on every television as the cherished daughter taken too soon. The Pine Grove Inn hadn't altered. Still smelt like lavender and ancient wood. I rented a room using Lena's last name. Paid in cash. I wasn't prepared for attention. Not quite yet. Over the course of the following day, I observed everything as if I were a spectator at my own trial. Emily had overreacted on the internet. She shared a carousel of pictures of us as kids, cropped in half, with her in the middle and myself to the side. I lost my sister, my best friend, the post said. Nothing will ever be the same in life. Claire, you can relax. My coffee nearly suffocated me. Best buddy. This is from the gal who previously claimed to have fabricated my college application in front of a whole dinner party. She once grabbed credit for my high school charitable project and grinned while I sobbed in the restroom. However, there she was, standing as though it were her wedding day in front of St. Elora Church while wearing a black outfit. For example, she was the sad lead in this performance. Next was Mom's post, a basic picture of a candle burning. Claire had hardships throughout her life. However, we adored her. Every time we did. Rewind. Emily poured orange juice on my laptop the night before exams, and I'm 16 years old, sitting on the kitchen floor, trembling from a panic attack. Mom is standing over me with Annie crossed. You must become more resilient. Being vulnerable does not bring rewards in life. One more flash. I'm 25. I'm requesting a little loan following a layoff. What did she say? Perhaps if you had made wiser decisions in life. I wasn't loved by them. They put up with me. Or worse, I was obliterated. Lena stopped by that evening and gave me a USB disk. You understand? She muttered. The speech is being used. I felt sick to my stomach. I was still struggling to keep things together years ago. I composed a letter, I suppose a sort of farewell. To fade away, not to perish. In case something ever occurred, I handed it to Lena. In case the story was misrepresented, just in case they feigned concern. As it happens, they located it. Lena could have shared it once out of desperation. I didn't inquire. All I knew was that a preacher I hardly remembered would read it out loud to a crowded group of individuals who had forgotten my existence. I got the file open. The darkness was always me, the background sounds. It was the source of all the discomfort. I may have been too much or too little, perhaps both. If I ever vanish, remember, it was never abrupt. For years I've been fading. I gazed at the display. My grief, my words. With grave expressions and mellow music playing in the background, they would now read them, as if they had experienced a tragedy. Not due to them. I was unable to look away. Emily's voice trembled when she went live that evening in a lighted room wearing a silky black silk dress. In her own way, Claire was strong but compassionate. I wish I had shown my admiration for that to her more frequently. In a flashback, I'm 22 years old and crying because my ex abandoned me after Emily informed him I was mentally unstable. Just doing you a favor, sis, she answered with a smile. Let's return to the live feed. Tears. A pause. A glance at the camera. She was my sister, my spouse. My intention was to toss the laptop. They weren't lamenting my passing. Now that I was unable to speak for myself, they were cleaning me and making me easier to swallow. I alone could. I would too. That dawn, Santa Clara stood still and silent, as if it had always been. Arched windows of white stone. It was the sort of environment where everything seemed sacred, even falsehoods. Behind the thick wooden panels, I could hear muted conversations as I stood just outside the rear doors. Lena had her phone ready and was parked 3 streets away. She didn't have to record it for me. All I had to know was that someone was observing. Someone who saw me, really. The ceremony had begun inside. The coffin was shut. There was nothing inside, of course. Just to represent a life they had no desire to comprehend. As the eulogy unfolded like a practiced theatrical performance, I waited. Mom was crying, but it was the kind of crying where her eyes remained dry and only her voice cracked. She claimed that she struggled constantly, exactly as she typed. However, we cherished her, is wrapped in velvet. Then Emily took the microphone. She appeared to be channeling some lifetime drama as she wore thin heels and a black fascinator. Through the stained glass, I could practically see her reflection. She had a stunning appearance. She did it every time. Her heart and mouth, however, were never the same. She whispered that she was misinterpreted. However, she had a light spirit. And that's it. The pianist touched the keys with their fingers. The church was filled with a gentle, well-known tune. My all-time favorite tune. They made a call. Emily used to make fun of me for having feelings for her. Too strange, too slow, and too dramatic. The back doors of St. LRA creaked open, slowly and deliberately, like something from a nightmare or a dream, and it was time for me to push them open with one gloved hand on the worn brass handle. People turned. The pianist stopped. The rhythm of my heels clicking against the stone floor was more assured than I felt. I didn't stop, though. Not for the gasps or the whispers. Grandma Agnes paled and turned her head. She slipped from the pew in a faint after her hand shook. The woman beside her let out a scream. Emily let her phone fall. It echoed like thunder and clattered to the ground. Mom's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The pastor took a step back from the podium. We were told you were gone," he stammered. I stopped halfway down the aisle, letting the light from the windows catch on the edge of my black coat. "Well," I said, voice steady, eyes locked on my mother. I was. Then I smiled. "But I'm not anymore." You could feel it in the room. The way reality bent around. Shock. The way guilt rises like steam from a pot when the lid is yanked off. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. I reached into my bag and pulled out a flash drive. "Since you're already gathered to honor my memory," I said, "I thought it'd be nice to share a few things you conveniently left out." The pastor looked to my mother, confused. Judith Morgan, usually quick with words, sat frozen, eyes wide, lips trembling, hands clenched in her lap like she was trying not to crumble. Emily stood up, finally face white. "Claire, what is this?" I cocked my head. "You tell me. You've all had 3 years to write your version of the story. Now it's my turn." The projector screen behind the pulpit blinked on. Lena had accessed it remotely, just like we planned. I plugged in the drive and hit play. The screen flickered to life behind the altar, and the church fell into stunned silence. I stepped aside and let the truth speak for itself. The first video was grainy, recorded through a slightly cracked phone screen, but the voices were clear. "If we declare her legally dead, the life insurance kicks in," Emily said, her voice sharp but calm. "Are you sure it'll work?" Mom replied. "She's been gone for years. No contact. It's not like she's coming back." A gasp echoed from the back of the room. Click next. A screen recording of an email correspondence titled, "Claire's Assets Breakdown from Emily Morgan to Judith Morgan, Richard Morgan. Subject dividing Claire's things. I'll take the apartment. Mom receives the jewels. Dad can deal with her student accounts. We may donate the remainder." Click. A scanned paper emerged, a fuzzy signature at the bottom. "Last will and testament of Claire Morgan alone. I never wrote a will." And the signature? Not even close. Click photographs of the flat I formerly lived in. Cleared out. Sold after renovation. Quick flip was the title of the real estate agent's post. In 3 days, the inherited property sold. Click on a receipt for a bank transfer. Emily's account was credited with $112,000 under. The heading Life Insurance Payout. Click. The church burst into flames. People looked aside, sobbed, and muttered. A few got up to go. The pianist's hands smothered her face. "Dear God," said a woman at the front as she shook her head. With a harsh yet clear voice, I took another step forward. "You didn't simply leave me. You took me away." At last, Mom stood up and spoke in a high-pitched voice. "Claire, we believed you were gone forever. How were we to proceed? Sit and wait interminably. There was nothing we could do." I cocked my head. "No. You had an option. You just made a mistake." Once more, the doors squeaked open. I didn't walk through this time. It was Naomi Blackwell, my lawyer. Suit pressed, stone-faced, heels clicking. 2 police in uniform followed. Naomi walked up to the pulpit as if it were her court. "We're serving arrest warrants for identity theft, fraud, and forgery under Ashridge County authorities," she said. The color faded from Judith's face. Emily took a step back and stumbled. It's not real. She's telling lies." A folder was held up by Naomi. "We have 3 years of missing persons in activity, money documents, and conversation recordings. Claire never said she was dead. Did you?" At last, Dad stood up, his fists clenched. "This family is being destroyed by you." I gave him a glance. For the first time in years, I gave him a real look. "The day you sold your daughter's name, you damaged it, as if it were a company asset." The cops came slowly. One of the officers gently blocked Emily's way as she attempted to sneak out. Judith wept aloud, now in a messy manner, in a terrified manner that no longer felt staged. From the front pew, I observed everything. I refrained from crying. I didn't yell. For the first time in a long time, I just breathed. I could feel the air in every part of me. Naomi looked across to me. "Do you still intend to file charges?" I surveyed the church where they attempted to bury my memories. Instead, I decided to rise there. "Indeed. Let them experience what it's like to be wiped," I said. I stood and got my coat as the cops started to quietly leave while the cuffs clasped over their wrists. The stillness they left behind was louder than anything they had ever spoken to me, even as the projector screen faded to dark. Before the sirens faded behind me, I left the chapel. The rustle of evidence being gathered, the yelling of chairs, the scratching of the floor, and voices rising not in mourning but in terror. Emily's scream pierced through everything. We were set up by her. I didn't recoil. It felt different now, the brightness outdoors, clearer and sharper. My coat was slung across one arm as I stood on the stairs of St. Elora, and I felt tall for the first time in years. Whole, not bitter, nor heavier. I refrained from crying. I didn't have to. They made no apologies. Naturally, they didn't, because only those who like them and think they've done anything wrong would apologize. They so completely alter reality that they are unable to look beyond their own interpretation of it. However, that was no longer my job, repairing their narratives and giving their shame a rational explanation. As soon as I entered the church, the burden vanished. I also didn't turn around. I stood in front of my own headstone later that night. Morgan, Claire Elizabeth, April 17, 1991. August 3, 2020. Too soon, a kind soul passed away. It had pink lilies all around it, the flower I disliked the most. Tucked into the stone was a laminated picture that Emily had uploaded to the internet. She only remembered to add me back in when readers questioned why the deceased sister wasn't in any of the photos, the same one where she had cropped me partly out. The back of my throat ached from the irony. In front of the grave, I knelt. This place was serene. Keep quiet. No mics, no performances. Only dirt and stone and truth. I reached inside my coat pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper that I had written the night before the funeral while alone in my hotel room. I read the lines aloud, smoothed the edges, and set it beneath the flowers. I returned stronger, but you buried the old me. To the girl who needed your affection, may you rest in peace. I left her there and got up. That was the me that pleaded for morsels of love, who sobbed in private, who made herself smaller in order to make others feel larger. Now, she was gone. I wasn't grieving for her either. I was letting her go. The tree line weighed my automobile. The spring air brushed my skin as I got into the driver's seat, turned on the engine, and rolled down the window just enough. The legal complaint had already been launched by Naomi. The criminal charges would be handled by the state. The news stories were on the way. The repercussions were the same. I grinned when I turned into the wide road, though, despite all of that. I grinned because I had regained my voice, which was the one thing they were most scared of. Mine is neither the most beautiful or the loudest. I drove out of Ashridge to keep going, not to go away. To begin anew, not to start over. As the lady who ensured they would never forget she existed, not as the daughter they buried. Story 4. Your brother's business has to come first. That's what my father said when I told him I had won a scholarship from MIT. I only needed $20,000 yearly to cover my living expenses and study materials. But instead of being proud, he crushed my future. The next day I decided to leave home, telling myself, If they don't need me, I'll create my worth. But 10 years later, when everything turned upside down, they came looking for me. What do they want, and what will I do? Follow my story to find out. Hello, I'm Thomas, 28 years old. Today is a special day, 10 years since I left my family. I always remember this day, not out of nostalgia, but because it marks the moment I truly understood my place in the family. I still remember that day vividly. A Monday morning sunlight streaming through the curtains as I stepped outside to collect the mail. The MIT logo was printed on the envelope. I tore it open my eyes, scanning the lines, and when I saw the words, "Congratulations, you have been accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship," my heart nearly leaped out of my chest. I did it. I ran straight into the house, my feet barely touching the ground from excitement. "Dad! Mom! I got into MIT!" I shouted as I saw them sitting in the living room. My father watched the news. My mother read the account books, but when they heard my voice, they both turned to look at me. I beamed, holding up the letter. MIT, one of the top universities in the world. I got a partial scholarship. They stared at me. No applause, no congratulatory hugs, no pride, no joy. None of the reactions I had hoped for. My father took the letter and skimmed through it. Then he sighed. "MIT is good, but a partial scholarship means there are still a lot of expenses, right?" I nodded, still smiling. "Yes, but I only need $20,000 a year. MIT is covering tuition for housing, food, and books. I need you to help with the rest." I expected them to understand. I expected them to be happy and say they would support me in pursuing this dream. But instead, my mother shook her head. "Jack needs money to expand the company. The family can only invest in one person." "Jack?" It was always Jack. My throat went dry. "What are you saying?" My mother sighed as if I had asked something obvious. "Jackie's business is growing. With more capital, he can double the profits within a year. $20,000 a year for you. That's a big expense and doesn't benefit the family." I felt a tightness in my chest. "I'm your son." My voice trembled. "I've worked my whole life to prove myself. This is MIT, a life-changing opportunity. And all you care about is Jackie's profits." My father folded his newspaper, his sharp gaze locking onto mine. "Watch your tone," he snapped. "Jackie's company is the future of this family. It will keep us stable for generations." Then he looked me straight and said something I will never forget. "Your brother S. business has to come first. No hesitation, no remorse." So this was how it had always been. I was never truly part of this family. That afternoon, I locked myself in my room. I lay on my bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. But my mind was trapped in old memories. The countless times my parents favored Jack flooded back like a slow-motion film. Each scene, each word, each feeling of being left behind. Jack was 8 years older than me, the perfect older brother, the ideal son. He was handsome, confident, and had a natural talent for business. Since childhood, my parents had placed all their hopes on him. Me, I was just the second child, the one no one expected but had to exist. I never hated Jack, I never resented him. But I hated how my parents treated me because of him. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" That sentence haunted me my entire life. Jack could make mistakes, but my parents always had a reason to defend him. I never got that kind of forgiveness. Once Jack broke a window while playing ball, my mother just laughed and said, "It's okay. Boys should be energetic like that." But I spilled a glass of water on the dining table another day and she snapped, "Thomas, why are you always so clumsy?" Jack skipped school for a whole month to intern at a big company. My parents applauded him, saying it was a real-world experience. I skipped class for one day to compete in a programming contest, and my mother only frowned. School is already hard enough. Why waste time on nonsense? Jack once failed an important exam, and my mother gently reassured him. "It's okay, sweetheart. You'll do better next time." And me? I scored perfect on my math test and ran to show my father. He glanced at it, shrugged, and said, "Good job." But Jack competed at the national level when he was your age. I engraved that moment into my heart. No matter how hard I tried, I would never be Jack. I was never the priority. Jackie's birthday, a grand party, balloons, expensive gifts, relatives gathering to celebrate my birthday, a small cake, a few polite wishes. Some years they even forgot it entirely. They always said Jack and I were both their sons. and that they loved us equally. But that love was never divided evenly. Jack was the long-term investment. I was just the backup plan. But instead of giving up, I decided to prove that I didn't have to be Jack to be valuable. I worked harder, studied more, joined extracurricular activities, and won competitions. But Jackie's presence overshadowed every achievement. I didn't want to be Jack, I just wanted my parents to see me as me. But that never happened. And today, after my father said, "Your brother S business has to come first," I knew it never would. I decided to leave home. I no longer wanted to live in my brother S shadow. No more comparisons. No more being looked down on or treated as a backup plan. I wanted a life that was indeed mine. But to do that, I needed to make sure I could support myself. I opened my laptop, logged into MIT financial aid system, and searched for every possible option. After more than 10 minutes of speaking with the financial aid office, I realized I didn't need my parents' money. MIT didn't just offer scholarships, they had support programs for students in need. I could work part-time on campus or with MIT-affiliated organizations. On top of that, I could live in the dorms, which cost significantly less than renting an apartment. That was enough. I could stand on my own. The following day, I gathered all my courage and walked to the living room where my parents had breakfast. "I'm going to be independent," I said firmly. "I'm going to MIT without your money." My parents looked up at me as if I had just said something absurd. My mother set down her teacup and crossed her arms. "What are you talking about?" I contacted MIT Financial Aid Office. I continued, "They have financial assistance programs for students in need. I can work part-time. The dorms are affordable. I don't need your money." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Who do you think you are to make this decision on your own?" he roared. I clenched my fists but stood my ground. This is my life, and I will decide how to live it. The tension in the room was suffocating. I had never seen my parents this angry before. My mother shook her head and let out a cold laugh. "You think living on your own will be easy? You'll come crawling back. Now I want tea," I said unwavering. My father stood up, his eyes burning with rage. "If you walk out that door, you are no longer my son." The words cut through me like a sharp blade. But instead of pain, I felt relief. They had never indeed seen me as their son. This was just the final confirmation. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "All right then." Then I turned, walked upstairs, and started packing my bags. I was leaving today. I arrived in Cambridge with $2,000 in my pocket, the small amount I had saved over the years. Everything the first owned fit into a single, worn-out suitcase and a backpack carrying my laptop. No one saw me off. No one wished me luck. It was just me and the journey ahead. When I set foot on MIT campus, the school guided me through the dormitory process and part-time job opportunities. MIT's financial aid system was truly efficient. They didn't just provide scholarships. They created opportunities for students like me to sustain themselves for years past in the blink of an eye. Every day was packed. In the mornings, I attended classes, ensuring I never missed a lecture and writing down every word. I worked at the library in the afternoons, sometimes in the lab. I took on any job that could help me earn extra money. At night, I returned to my dorm and continued studying. I read books, watched online courses, and coded until late. I had no time to think about anything else. But no matter how busy I was, there were still moments of emptiness. My parents, Jack, since the day I left, they had never reached out to me. No messages, no calls, not even a single question about how I was doing, as if I had never existed in that family. In the beginning, I missed them terribly. I stared at the ceiling on my first nights in the dorm, wondering if they ever thought about me. Many times I picked up my phone and typed a simple message. "Mom, Dad, I'm doing okay." But every time I deleted it, I was afraid that they would think I had failed if I reached out first. Afraid they would mock me. Afraid they would sit together and say, "He'll come back. He can't make it on his own." I couldn't let that happen, so I chose silence. They never contacted me, and I never contacted them. I buried those emotions and work, studying, and the goals I set for myself because I had made a promise to myself. If they don't need me, I'll show them that I don't need them either. And 4 years later, I walked across that stage with a prestigious degree. But more importantly, I was no longer that desperate kid from the past, graduating from MIT with top honors. I became a rising star in the tech industry. Major companies sought after me. My inbox overflowed with lucrative offers. Salaries reaching $150,000 yearly with housing, cars, and stock options for a fresh graduate. It was a dream come true, but I turned them all down. I didn't want to spend my life building someone else's dream. Instead of taking a stable job, I continued working part-time. I poured every dollar I earned into developing a personal finance management app, a tool designed for working-class people. For those like me, before I got to change my life, I believed in it. It could help millions take control of their finances, avoid debt, and prevent financial crises. I bet everything on this project, and 6 months later, it collapsed. Not enough users? No investors. No steady income. I lost every penny of my savings sitting in my nearly empty apartment. I stared at the stack of unpaid bills on the table. My phone rang endlessly. Calls from my landlord, the bank, and debt collectors I had lost. I had convinced myself that I would never fail if I worked hard enough. But reality doesn't always work that way. One night, I wandered to the Harvard Bridge. The cold wind cut through my skin beneath me. The dark river surged deep and endless. I looked down, and a part of me wondered if I disappeared. Would anyone care? My parents, Jack. The people who had forgotten me for the past 4 years, now no one. But then I remembered why I started. I remembered the moment I walked out of that house with nothing but an unshakable will. I had told myself I would create my worth. Not for my parents, not for Jack, for me. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Then I turned my back to the water and walked away. Instead of jumping, I went home, opened my laptop, and started over. After my first failure, I was left with nothing. But this time, I didn't rush. I spent the next 3 years learning from those better than me. I devoured everything about financial management, startups, and technology. I followed successful entrepreneurs, attended tech events, and sought out people who had walked the path I wanted to take. But I also needed stability to be safe. For this time, I worked at a small tech company. A $60,000 salary is not high by industry standards, but it is enough to live comfortably without worrying about monthly bills. The job wasn't too stressful, no overtime, and most importantly, it gave me the time to keep chasing my dream. I no longer had to work myself to exhaustion to survive. And then, as if fate had arranged it, I met my mentor, a fintech entrepreneur. He had failed, lost everything, and rebuilt his company into a business worth hundreds of millions. He saw potential in me, and I learned more from him than from any course I had ever taken. I refined my business model and rebuilt my app from scratch. I didn't repeat my old mistakes. This time I understood the market. I had a strategy. I knew how to raise funds. I learned how to create a product with real value. And this time it succeeded. My financial app attracted over 1 million users and secured millions in funding. I became a recognized name in the startup world. I was invited to speak at major conferences, featured in articles, and signed deals with top investors. I had accomplished what no one thought I could years ago. But no matter how much success I achieved, my family remained utterly silent. No messages, no calls. I once believed that if I succeeded one day, my parents would finally look at me with pride. But no. I didn't exist in their world. I thought they had forgotten me. But they hadn't. They still remembered me. And they came looking for me. I remember how it felt to see them standing outside my apartment gate. I remember how it felt when they said they missed me. For a moment, I thought I had finally been acknowledged, that this was the moment we would mend our broken family bonds. But no, missing me was just an afterthought. The real reason they came was money. My name was everywhere in the media. After my company secured tens of millions in funding, the press hailed me as one of fintech's most successful young entrepreneurs. My company expanded into medical technology a year later, developing an AI platform for early disease detection. This time, I wasn't just a name in the startup world, I was a symbol. And then they came looking for me. It was a winter day 6 months ago. After nearly a decade of silence, I remember exactly how it felt to see them standing outside my apartment. My mother, my father, and Jack, they stood there shivering in the cold, looking at me as if I were a stranger they had just recognized in a crowded street. I froze. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. They were looking for me. I had imagined this moment so many times. I had thought that one day when I was successful and wealthy enough, they would finally see my worth. I had dreamed of a day when my parents would be proud of me, when they would admit they were wrong, when they would tell me they missed me. And today they were here, son. My mother's voice trembled. We've missed you so much. For a moment, a part of me wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that I had finally been recognized after all these years. I thought this was the moment to heal. But no, missing me was secondary. The real reason they came was money. I invited them inside, even though I had no desire for this reunion. Deep down, my father glanced around the moment they stepped in, his expression briefly satisfied. Nice place. He nodded approvingly. Jack scanned the apartment, smirking. Living alone in a big place must be pretty lonely. I didn't respond. My mother smiled, reaching for my hand. Her voice softer than I remembered. I'm so proud of you, Thomas. I didn't react 10 years ago. Those words would have brought me to tears. But now they meant nothing. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. I broke it first. What do you want? Their eyes shifted, hesitation flickering across their faces. And then, after a long pause, my mother finally spoke. Jack made a bad investment, she said, trembling. The family business is on the verge of bankruptcy. He needs your help. I let out a quiet laugh. I had expected this, yet somehow it still disappointed me. So in the end, you only remember me when you need money. I spoke slowly, locking eyes with him. My father frowned. Thomas, don't say it like that. We're family. Helping each other is what family does. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, my voice steady. Family. Let me remind you what family did for me 10 years ago. My mother opened her mouth, but I held a hand to stop her. I asked you for $20,000 yearly to attend MIT. Not for fun, but to build a future. And you said no. Why was that again? I paused for a moment, then looked directly at my father. All right, because your brother's business has to come first. Silence. Jack looked away. My mother bit her lip. My father's face remained unreadable, and then he scoffed. If I had helped you back then, would you be where you are today? He said, his voice tinged with pride. You should be thanking me. It's because I didn't help you that you became the successful. I froze for a second. Then I laughed. So you're saying I owe my success to you abandoning me? Exactly. He shrugged. If I had given you the money, you'd be another ordinary MIT graduate. But because you had to survive on your own, you became extraordinary. I trained you to be strong. Anger burned in my chest. Incredible. The first clapped slowly. So if Jack is struggling now, does that mean you'll let him become strong the same way? Or will you sacrifice me again to save him? My mother rushed to interject. This is different, Thomas. Jack has dedicated his life to our family's business. I let out a bitter laugh. Dedicated his life. He was given everything from the start. You paved the way for him. If the business succeeded, he got all the glory. If it failed, he could turn to me. Jack clenched his fists, but said nothing. I stood up, looking at each of them in turn. You're not here because I'm your son. You're here because I have money. No one denied it. So they knew it too. I sighed, shaking my head. I used to think that if I became successful enough, you'd finally be proud of me. But now I see you're only proud of me when I have something you need. My mother grabbed my hand. Thomas, please help Jack. I pulled my hand away. Now figure it out yourselves. I stepped back, opening the door. Now get out before I call the police. After my firm words, a flicker of shock crossed their faces. Jack frowned, his fists clenched as if he wanted to say something. But in the end, he just bit his lip and stayed silent. My father glared at me as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. He wasn't used to being refused, especially not by me, the son he once deemed worthless. But now he had no choice. My mother lowered her head, sighed quietly, and gently pulled Jackie's arm. Reluctantly, they turned to leave. I stood motionless, watching their figures disappear beyond the door. I knew for sure they wouldn't give up so easily, and just as I expected, 2 days later, they showed up again. This time I didn't invite them in. They stood at my door, looking more exhausted and desperate than before. But I no longer cared. Arms crossed, I leaned against the door frame, my expression calm but cold. What is it this time? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. My father let out a deep sigh, meeting my gaze. I'm sorry for what I said before. Truly, we're very proud of you, I smirked. Really? Are you proud of me or proud of the money I make? My mother blinked, rushing to speak before I could say anything else. Almost as if she was afraid that if I kept talking, she'd lose her chance to convince me. Help, Jack, please. We know we were wrong to favor him, but we're family no matter what. We raised you. We gave you life. Can't you help him? Just this once? I laughed a short, sharp, bitter laugh. Oh. So now you finally admit you favor Jack? My father pressed his lips together but didn't deny it. I shook my head, scanning their faces. They had never apologized for choosing Jack over me. Not on the day I left home with nothing. Not on the day I was featured in magazines as Young Entrepreneur of the Year. Not on the day I built my company into something bigger than they had ever imagined. But today they admitted it. Not because they regretted it, because they needed me. I didn't give them an answer right away. Instead, I stared at them, letting the silence stretch out, letting them feel every second of it. I need time to think. My mother's face lit up, nodding eagerly. Of course, sweetheart. Take your time. Just knowing you'll consider it makes me happy. I didn't respond. I watched as they turned and walked away. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood there looking down at my hands. They weren't shaking. It was not like the day I held my MIT acceptance letter in front of them and was rejected. Not like the day I walked out of that house alone to face the world. This time I was the one in control. The next day I decided not to let emotions cloud my judgment. I needed the truth. I called a friend who specialized in finance and asked him to investigate my family's business over the past decade. I wanted to know everything. 2 days later, a thick folder arrived at my door. I opened it and read every line carefully, and as I scanned through the financial reports, I froze. My throat went dry, my fingers gripping the pages so tightly they nearly crumpled. 10 years ago, they sold my grandfather's house. The house he had explicitly told them to keep. Before he passed away, the house that held all the memories of my childhood. They sold it for $800,000, and every last dollar went into Jack's business expansion. Meanwhile, I had only asked for $20,000 to go to school. $20,000? Not even 3% of what they had made from selling the home my grandfather had worked so hard to preserve. But it didn't stop there. I flipped through the documents until my eyes landed on a bank statement. Within 3 years of getting that money, they had poured it all into Jack's reckless investments. Jack didn't just expand the company. He dabbled in real estate, cryptocurrency, and tech stocks. He burned through $800,000 in just 5 years. All of it gone. The records detailed every significant expense. $250,000 to open 2 new company branches. One of them shut down within a year due to losses. $180,000 invested in a Florida real estate project. Jack, lacking experience, was scammed by a fraudulent brokerage. $100,000 was thrown into cryptocurrency at its peak. A year later, the market crashed and the money vanished. $70,000 for? A brand new sports car, a reward for Jack after a hard year of work. Jack had burned through every cent, and my parents had let him. And when Jack finally lost it all, they came to me because I was the backup plan. I let out a dry, hollow laugh. So that was my worth to them. Jack could have everything, no matter how many times he failed. Meanwhile, even with a scholarship from one of the world's top universities, I wasn't worth a fraction of what they had handed him. Yet just yesterday they dared to say, "We raised you, we gave you life." What a joke. I set the folder on the table, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes. My parents had sold our family's legacy and discarded my grandfather's wishes, all for Jack. And now, with Jack failing yet again, they turned to me. The following day, I decided to return home for the first time in 10 years. I stepped through the gate I had once walked out of with nothing. No nostalgia, no sentimentality. Only one thing filled me now: clarity. I entered the living room. My father, mother, and Jack were already seated, waiting. I glanced at them. My mother looked tense. My father sat with his arms crossed, and Jack slouched in his chair, not bothering to hide his irritation. I didn't waste time. "How much do you need?" They didn't hesitate. $500,000. $500,000. I let out a hollow laugh. 10 years ago, I had asked for $20,000 to go to school, and they refused. And now they dared to demand 25 times that amount without a second thought. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm. Finally, I agree. All 3 of them froze for a second, caught off guard, but I wasn't finished. I turned to my father, meeting his gaze head on. But I need collateral. I want this house signed over to me. The room fell into an eerie silence. My mother frowned, worry flashing in her eyes. Jack stared at me as if I had just insulted him and my father, the same man who had once coldly told me to leave this house. Now glared at me with fury. You're joking, right? I shook my head. Now this is a loan, not a handout. If you pay me back in full within 5 years, the house will be returned to you. If not, it's mine. Jack slammed his fist on the table. You're exploiting the family situation to steal our home. I met his gaze without blinking. Not me, you. That's exactly what Mom and Dad did to me 10 years ago. My mother reached for my hand, her voice desperate. Thomas, you don't have to do this. I pulled my hand away. Then tell me, why didn't you think that way when I asked for $20,000? My father shot up from his seat, furious. You're being selfish. Yes. Just like you were with me, I replied without hesitation. Jack was too angry to stay still. You already have everything. Thomas, why do you need this house? I tilted my head, giving him a cold, knowing smile. And why do you need $500,000 if you're sure you'll get the money back? This shouldn't be a problem. The house is just collateral. Zenit. Jack didn't answer because he knew I was right. The room fell into silence again. A suffocating, heavy silence. My father clenched his fists. My mother glanced at Jack and he furrowed his brows, tension written all over his face. No one dared to break the moment. And so I decided to do it myself with a gamble that could cost me $500,000. But if they genuinely remembered me, I wouldn't regret it. I took a deep breath and spoke slowly. All right, I'll invest $500,000 in you. Their eyes lit up with relief. My mother teared up. Jack smiled for the first time since I arrived, and my father nodded approvingly as if I had finally done something right. But I wasn't finished. Not so fast. I raised a hand, my voice steady. There's one more condition. The tension returned. If you can tell me my exact birthday, I'll transfer the money immediately. My mother blinked rapidly. Jack's frown deepened, and my father tilted his head as if I had just said something absurd. 10s passed. 30 a minute. No one spoke. They were trying to remember. 5 minutes. I crossed my arms and waited. 10 minutes. Not a single word. No one dared to guess. And then finally, my father spoke. August 25th, 1997. I laughed. I said nothing else. Instead, I placed the folder I had brought on the table. Everything I had uncovered about their finances, every reckless transaction, every blind decision they had thrown away, every dollar for Jack. Then I stood up, walked away from the table, and headed straight for the door before stepping out. I turned back one last time. Goodbye. From now on, don't ever come looking for me again. And then I left. No one followed me. No one called my name. No one tried to stop me, because they had never indeed remembered me. And this time I had finally freed myself. After that day, I blocked all contact with them. No more messages. No more calls. They had lost the right to reach me, just as they had abandoned me 10 years ago. But that didn't stop them from trying. They came to my company a few times, only to be turned away by security. Then they showed up at my home. I refused to see them, and when they refused to leave, I called the police. And just like that, they disappeared. 6 months passed. I heard that Jack S. Company had officially gone bankrupt. No more funding to keep it afloat. No one is willing to invest and bail him out. Jack had to sell his car and personal assets to manage his debts. My parents sold their house to cover some of his significant liabilities. In the end, they were left with nothing. They bought a small house in the suburbs and started doing jobs they had never done before. I didn't care how they lived or whether they struggled, because for the first time in my life, I had indeed let go of the burden of them. I no longer sought their approval. I had freed myself, but the story didn't end there. After lengthy negotiations, I finally bought back my grandfather's house a month ago. They sold the same house for $800,000 to fund Jack S. business. But now I had to pay over $2 million to reclaim it. When some relatives heard about it, they came to me. They berated me. You're the reason this family fell apart. You have money and you won't even help them. Are you trying to get revenge on your parents? I looked them straight in the eye. Where were you when my parents mistreated me? Silence. I didn't need an answer. I blocked their numbers. People who only speak up when it benefits them have no place in my life. When my colleagues and business partners heard my story, they didn't just sympathize, they were proud to work with me. You carved your path. No one can take that away from you. I respect you for setting boundaries. Not everyone dares to do that. They didn't pity me, they respected me. And that was what truly mattered. What about you? What do you think about me and my decisions? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this story. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Story 5. My brother grinned and added, "Thanks for the money, but nobody wants a janitor in the wedding photos." I gave a nod. I canceled the catering I had paid for when I got home. After that, I packed my bags, went on vacation, and laughed. After a day, my phone exploded. My brother shouted it clearly and loudly while I was still standing in the reception tent's corner. He smiled as if it were the last line of a joke he had been wanting to tell all night. Lifting his glass of champagne at me, Aiden Allen yelled, "I really appreciate you taking care of the meals and everything, dude. A true hero's move. People look in my direction." I grinned, uncomfortable. He continued, however, stopping for dramatic effect. "Let's be truthful. A janitor in the wedding pictures is something no one wants." Quiet, then clumsy laughs. His best friend laughed. Emma, his bride, covered her face with her wine glass. A couple of relatives examined their footwear. Alan's colleague turned away after giving me a pathetic look. I simply stood there wearing my blue uniform shirt and work boots. My sleeves still have the little smell of bleach on them. I chuckled. Only once. A little exhalation via the nose. "You're correct," I said after that. That was all. No drink was thrown by me. I didn't shout. Unlike in a movie, I didn't just barge out. As if nothing had occurred, I just turned back, grinned at my younger brother, and strolled off the lawn and into the parking lot, but inside. Something within separated neatly and silently. The manner that a deep cut is not felt until the blood is seen. I spent a lot of time sitting in my car and watching people dance through the windows of the reception hall. In contrast to the fairy lights, they seemed like shadows. I took out my phone and accessed the catering confirmation that I had paid for some weeks prior. $93.24.77. If canceled within 24 hours, there is no reimbursement. I arrived barely in time. After selecting cancel, I purchased a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. A janitor in the wedding pictures is something no one wants. All right, let's see how people will react to pictures of weddings without food on the tables. I appreciate the money. However, nobody wants to see a janitor in the wedding pictures. It wasn't merely a painful sentence. Everything I hadn't been able to notice for the past 8 years was exploded. Allow me to explain. My younger brother is Alan. The lovely one was always the enjoyable one. The child who got by with a skewed smile and justifications like I'm working it out while others cleaned up the pieces. Usually me. I never attended college. Alan was changing majors like socks, so I cleaned them. To assist mom and dad with paying our tuition, I was dragging a mop around the corridors of the dorms. He left after 3 semesters. "I don't want to go to college," he added. "However, thank you, my friend. You're saving lives." That was his go-to line. When he and Emma moved in together, I assisted him in obtaining his first apartment, paid his past due utilities, and covered the deposit. He remarked, "You're the only one I trust with the wedding aid after they became engaged. Can you assist us in making it happen?" I would answer yes, he knew. I did the impossible because I always did. I gave up my single vacation in years, took on extra, and skipped weekends. I spent every spare penny on the wedding. I covered the cost of the catering. When Emma's mother forgot her checkbook, I assisted her with the venue deposit. Because the first garment made Emma fat, I even paid for the additional expense of her second dress. I grinned. When they shared a kiss, I applauded. What did I receive? I appreciate the money. However, nobody wants to see a janitor in the wedding pictures. That smirk, that phrase. He seemed proud of himself based on the glint in his eye, as if it were a mic drop. I woke up the following morning in my low-cost hotel room, the windows open to let in the sea air and California breeze. It ought to have been a sense of relief. Rather, I felt a knot of anger in my stomach. I went through my phone's contents. 47 calls were not returned. By 6 p.m., the messages had begun. "Emma, where are you, Aiden? Alan, did you call off the meal, dude? Tell me this is a misunderstanding, please, Mom. Do you realize how embarrassed we were, Emma? Early departures were made, Dad. Aiden, give me a call immediately." The icing on the cake. "Alan, You went too far, bro. Nobody wants to see a janitor in the wedding pictures, as I mentioned. However, this is pitiful. I spent a lot of time looking at that message. Not even an apology? No, it wasn't my intention. Just more teasing. My phone called once more that evening. I left it on voicemail, Mom. Then she phoned once more, though, and once more. I finally picked Aiden up. She said, "What's the matter with you? Hello, Mother. It's nice to hear from you as well." Emma's relatives are incensed. Everyone went home hungry after they spent all that money? Emma's relatives? I gave a sour laugh. You're referring to those who didn't spend any money and let me pay for the cake. The point isn't that. No, I responded bluntly. Your son is the point. You all laughed when your other kid made fun of me in front of everyone. Come on, please. She lost her temper. It was a joke. I fell silent. Do you truly find it amusing? I inquired. Do you find it amusing? I paid for Alan's wedding, canceled vacations, and declined increases in order to stay in town and assist you with the mortgage, only to be informed I wasn't photo-worthy. At that moment, the line went silent. Indeed, Aiden, you do wear that uniform everywhere. Perhaps if you put forth more effort. That was it. That was the time. The click. I ended the call. Dad called a few hours later. What were you contemplating? He lost his temper. People were phoning us. Nothing to eat was available. Emma sobbed in the restroom. I kept silent. Son, are you listening? Dad? Calmly, I said. May I ask you a question? What? Who covered Alan's last tuition after he left school? Did you? I'm irritated, he said. However, he didn't require a new transmission at that time because his automobile broke down. Who assisted him in purchasing a second-hand one? You did. 3 winters ago, when the heating was going to be turned off, you and your mother were behind on the home. A pause occurred. Then he gave a groan. What are you trying to say? Slowly, the first stated my point. I have never failed to show up. Not once. Has anyone expressed gratitude to me without a subsequent guilt trip? You all now act as though I owe you my humiliation and my silence. You're exaggerating. No, Father, I'm being finished. I didn't stop by Alan's house to make amends later that week, not even to quarrel. All I wanted to do was deliver the receipts. Without a shirt, he opened the door. I'm holding a beer. He scratched his head and said, "Oh." The ghost reappears. I gave him a folder made of manila. What is this? All the receipts for the wedding, I said. Catering, rentals, deposits, tips. You and Emma might want to actually pay people this time. He snorted, trying to prove you're the hero again. I just stared at him. You think you're better than me? He said. But all you do is mop floors and hold grudges. No, I said, I think I've been a fool. A janitor who believed love could be bought. Who thought family meant something. Alan smirked. Guess you finally figured it out. I gave a nod. Yeah. And I hope you enjoy living with the consequences. 3 days after the wedding. Quiet. No calls, no texts, no apology. Just complete cold nothingness. Then a letter arrived. White envelope, my name, and delicate handwriting. Inside was a typed message from Emma. Dear Aiden, we hope you understand what your actions cost us. My parents were humiliated. Alan is heartbroken. We're asking you to do the right thing and reimburse the expenses we had to cover after the catering cancellation. Enclosed is an invoice. We expect a transfer by Friday. Family means duty. The invoice. $2,400 for emergency pizza delivery, an additional generator, and my fave emotional anguish, $500 for her tears. I gazed at the letter, then casually fed it through my blender. Let the confetti pour. The next morning, Mom texted Mom, family supper Saturday. You're coming. We need to discuss. At first, I wasn't going to go, but then I thought, nah, forget that. I will go and I'll bring everything. Saturday night, 6 p.m. I strolled in with a rucksack over my shoulder, inside my laptop and a USB. My parents were ashamed. Alan is heartbroken. We kindly request that you compensate us for the costs we incurred following the cancellation of the catering. An invoice is enclosed. A move is anticipated by Friday. Family entails accountability. The bill, $2,400 for an additional generator and emergency pizza delivery. And the emotional discomfort I like best, $500 for her tears. I carefully put the letter through my blender after staring at it. Allow the confetti to fall. The next morning, Mom texted Mom. Saturday night family supper. You will arrive. We must speak. I wasn't planning to go at first, but then I changed my mind. I'll bring everything, and I'll go. I arrived at 6 p.m. on Saturday with a bag slung over my shoulder, a USB stick with screenshots, receipts, and a video I had been recording. They were all seated already. Mom was holding tissues as if she were about to cry. Arms crossed, stern face, remarked Dad. Alan dressed up like he was delivering a TED lecture, and Emma simultaneously looked wounded and arrogant. Assured, called Aiden. Mom said quietly, "Thank you for coming. Don't be," I answered. "It will not take long." Emma bent over. "All of us are working to get over this. But you made us seem foolish. Do you get that? Our day was destroyed by you." I extended my hand. "It's your time now." "It's mine now." After setting my laptop down on the table, I turned it on. "What is this?" Dad inquired, already wary. "Evidence." I select a video from the rehearsal dinner and press play. While testing her camera, my buddy, a photographer, unintentionally took this picture. The microphone was turned on. Emma and her dad were standing with Alan, Emma's mother. "So the catering is being paid for by your brother?" Alan chuckles. "Yes. The poor fellow believes it gives him a sense of belonging. Emma gave him permission. He can only ever be a part of something respectable in this way. Alan, do not be concerned. Cleaning up after others is nothing new to him. Literally." I put the video on hold. There was utter silence in the room. "Still amusing?" I inquired. No one responded. Mom appeared to be trying to vanish. Dad's face became white. Emma hurried to her feet. "That isn't contextualized, is it?" Alan's text conversations to a buddy were screenshotted when I opened another folder. Alan, the catering is being covered by Aiden. Told him we had no money. The DJ is being covered by Emma's parents, but we're keeping the rest for ourselves. Free meals, please. I give Alan my whole attention. You took advantage of me, lied to me, and then made fun of me. Now he stood too. This family was deceived by you? No, I said. At last, I stopped pretending to be the fool who banged his fist against the table. You are behaving like a kid. I looked over at him. Be calm, concentrated. No, I'm finally behaving like a man who isn't your fallback option. Emma's voice came out sharply. Our wedding was ruined by you. No, I said. I restored my respect to myself. Before I left, I grabbed my backpack. I stopped at the entrance. By the way, I forwarded the video to all of the attendees at your wedding, including Alan, your boss. He tensed. Do you recall how you made fun of janitors for being beneath you? Let's see how the HR division handles that. Emma let out a gasp. You didn't. Yes, I did. After that, I left. Not out of rage. In liberty. Behind me. For the first time in years, I felt nothing at all when I heard Emma start crying. The family disintegrates, and a surprising newcomer enters the picture. After leaving that dinner, I didn't take a car home. For the first time in my life, I pulled up to the shore, parked, sat on the hood, and simply gazed out at the ocean. The only person I felt accountable to was myself. I had nothing to offer the waves. They simply were. I could have remained there indefinitely until the phone exploded. There were 27 missed calls. There were 9 voicemails. Emma's mother called me a classless disgrace in a text message. Dad's one. You have caused us irreparable embarrassment. The real kicker, though, I think you're dead, Alan. This is something you'll regret. I read it 3 times. Grinning, I erased it. Don't be angry. Only relief. What I didn't expect was the public reaction. Apparently, someone at the wedding caught the tail end of my speech on video, uploaded it to TikTok. The audio of me saying I gave myself back my dignity was already trending by day 3. This is the most satisfying real-life moment I've ever seen. Dude's a janitor, but just mopped the whole family. Even BuzzFeed DM'd me asking for the full story. I ignored it all. I didn't need validation, but wow, it felt good. On Thursday, it got quiet, and that's when Sophie texted me. Sophie, my ex. We dated for 2 years back when I was still trying to earn my family's approval. She left because she couldn't watch me get walked over anymore. Sophie, I saw the video. I've never been prouder of you. I always knew there was fire in you. That just buried it. We met for coffee 2 days later. No expectations, no awkward tension. Just two people who had endured the same storm and eventually stepped into the sun. I left because I couldn't bear how they treated you, she remarked gently, swirling her drink. I kept hoping you'd see it for yourself. I saw, I said finally. She grinned. So now what? I don't know, I said. But for the first time, it'll be my decision. Back home. Things were burning. Emma left. 3 days after the video went viral, Alan abandoned him. Her parents reportedly warned her that she was a shame to their family. Alan sent me a 2-word note, "You prevail." I didn't respond. Then the unexpected surprise arrived. My cousin Kelly got in touch. Kelly, I've also finished them. I was inspired by you. The lease for my own apartment was just signed. At family get-togethers, she had always been the reserved one, never stops observing. As it happens, she was observing everything. My mother arrived at my flat on Sunday. I refused to allow her in. All I want to do is chat. Through the screen door, she spoke. Talk, then. Her voice faltered. Aiden, you destroyed the family. No, long before I stopped trying to mend the family, I said that it was broken. She was about to argue but refrained. Rather, she muttered, your dad isn't talking to anybody. Alan is still at home. No longer my burden. You made that plain, I said. Really, you won't assist us? She inquired. Not right now? No. Her gaze. I don't even recognize you, really. At last, I grinned and closed the door. I checked my email the next day. Sophie had left a message. In 3 weeks, I'll be heading to Costa Rica. You claim to have always wanted to travel. Do you still wish to? Before tightening, I gazed at the screen. Reserved. 2 days later, I set off on a quick journey. Not Costa Rica first. Just a peaceful weekend by myself. The evening before my departure, I was drinking whiskey while standing on my balcony. My social media was still inundated with messages. Individuals narrating their personal experiences. Thank you for expressing what they were unable to. My intention was not to set an example. I just got up. 9:12 p.m. The former closest buddy of Brian Allen sent another note. I'm proud of you, dude. You were always treated like garbage by him. You got out clear even though you destroyed everything. I grinned. It was finally over. Not because of the adulation. I spoke to the sky as I peered out over the city lights. I appreciate the wedding pictures. I raised a drink to the night after that. Heir to liberty, the reality of saying no at last. For you to feel the warmth at last, some bridges must burn. After 2 months, Costa Rican evening, warm. As I laid in a hammock with a book I hadn't read in years, the ocean wind caressed my skin. It had a salty mango tree scent. There are no ringing phones, no guilt like a noose around my neck. I had freedom. But you know what caught me off guard the most? They weren't missed by me. Not by any means. Growing up in a home like mine teaches you to feel a certain way. Above everything, duty. They inform you. Family's the most important thing. Blood is something you don't ignore. The elder one is you. It's your responsibility. However, they never discuss respect. Mutual effort was never addressed. Never acknowledged that unrestrained love is only control. Wearing a card with their hallmarks. For years, I believed I was doing the right thing. Mending and paying. Bending. Shrinking. For what purpose? To be assigned to my brother's wedding as the janitor? To be asked to pay for dessert after being removed from pictures? No, not anymore. It went viral a week after the wedding. Strangers sent me texts. People said that I motivated them and that I was bold. That they eventually distanced themselves from their own poisonous parents, siblings, and even partners. One message was particularly clear. I was once called useless by my brother. I was taking care of my niece and paying his rent. For the first time, your narrative made me turn away. I think I'm breathing. I could relate to that sensation. Thus, it made me feel something. And I realized I didn't just reclaim my life, I allowed folks to bring theirs to Alan. Still no job. I also never returned. When I last heard from her, she was attempting to wed into an affluent family that her father had met via golf. I wish you luck in your endeavor. Parents. They sent a family friend to intervene as a final ploy. Like some peace messenger, a man I hadn't seen since high school appeared at my door. He answered, "You've got your point. Now I understand. Perhaps it's time to return home." I didn't respond. I simply grabbed my phone, pulled out the wedding picture, the one with the champagne glass and Alan laughing. Additionally, I'm zoomed in and placed slightly out of frame in the corner. I responded, They didn't just crop the photo. I was clipped by them. There he stood, nothing to say. He nodded and walked away. I remained close to Sophie, but we didn't reconcile. Scars bind us together, the same form. She once traveled to Costa Rica to see me. We conversed till dawn while sipping rum on the beach. She remarked with a smile as she walked away, "I left you behind, and you've changed." This is a positive thing. She was correct. I completed a task that I had been putting off for years. A few weeks ago, I purchased a whiteboard from a nearby office supply store and scribbled a single phrase in large black characters over the top, with borders beneath. I mentioned 10 names of folks I had been attempting to win over for years. I put a column next to each name, showed me respect, took advantage of me. My name was one of the 2 names that received a check mark. Now, when people inquire as to whether I regret my actions, revealing the truth and canceling the catering, use a flamethrower to destroy every bridge, I chuckle since it wasn't relatives that I lost. It was a delusion. I wasn't loved by them. I was able to help them, and they enjoyed it. They cherished the quiet and compliance. Indeed, naturally, each time I unlocked my wallet, they extended their hands. But then I got up when I declined. They became strangers. Perhaps they were always. Retaliation is a fantasy for some individuals. I had a dream about peaceful mornings. Coffee without fear in my belly. I have friends that text me just for fun, not because they are in need of anything. I had a dream about waking up free of the burden of being someone else's emotional trash can. I have that now, and I will never again give it up. Alan sent me his final note on my birthday. "I hope you're content. You were necessary to us." I eventually said, grinning, "I needed me too." That's the distinction. This concludes the narrative. Freedom, not a picture-perfect family, not a cozy reunion over pie and forgiveness. You can't call it family if you treat me like furniture, one guy replied, finally looking his blood in the face. After then, he walked away without turning around. If you're seeking for a lesson, here it is. Call you cheap when you're spending your money if they make fun of your hardship. To cancel the catering, make fun of your work, your attire, and your heart. Book a flight after letting them experience what it's like to be hungry just once. To finally choose yourself, raise a glass and toast. An extra chapter. It was me who called off the catering for my brother's wedding. You may ask me anything. My brother told a gathering 2 months ago. I appreciate the cash, but nobody wants to see a janitor in the wedding pictures. I covered the cost of the catering. I canceled the entire order that evening, while humiliation and cold pizza were being provided. I was in Costa Rica, drinking wine on a terrace. At the moment, I remained silent. I simply turned to go. I'm now responding to the inquiries that people are making. Do I feel bad about it? No. I'm sorry I was silent for so long. Not for putting a line at last. Has Alan ever shown regret? No. You win, was his final message. I didn't respond. Was he abandoned by Emma? Indeed, 3 days following the nuptials. Were you supported by your parents? They made an effort to coerce me into reestablishing the family. I physically and emotionally shut the door in their face. Do you still work as a janitor? Yes, and I'm pleased about it. I don't simply clean floors, I clean messes. What were the responses? Good. I was thanked by thousands of strangers. Some people cut out poisonous family members. A female sent a message. You authorized me to resign from my position as the family bank. No. I was referred to as uncaring by others. Claimed that I spoiled a wedding. Not for a second. Someone once told me, "You'll regret it when your parents are gone." I don't. I've finished speaking. I've moved on. However, one question remains. Who do you become at the end of a lifetime of tidying up after others? I'm still trying to figure that out. And I'm all right with not knowing for the first